They dragged her to the execution block in chains, while 6 massive wolves howled from iron cages, their amber eyes burning with human anguish. The crowd screamed for her death. The Sorceress Queen smiled, and Lyra Voss, the mute servant who'd scrubbed their floors for 3 years, finally opened her mouth to speak the words that would shatter kingdoms. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. If you want to see how a voiceless girl brought an empire to its knees, stick around until the end. And hey, drop a comment with your city so I know where my fellow survivors are watching from. Hit that like button if you believe the underestimated can become unstoppable. Let me take you back to where it all began, in the frozen halls of Ironhold, where silence was survival, and love was the most dangerous magic of all. The bucket was heavier than it should have been. Lyra's arms trembled as she hauled the soapy water up the servants' stairs, her bare feet silent on stone worn smooth by centuries of use. 4 in the morning. The castle still sleeping. This was her time. The 2 hours before the nobility woke and remembered she existed. She preferred it that way. Her reflection rippled in the bucket's surface as she climbed. Thin face, sharp cheekbones that spoke of too many skipped meals, eyes the color of storm clouds that hadn't seen her real smile in 6 years, hair the shade of burnt copper, always tied back, always hidden beneath a rough servant's cap. 23 years old and already a ghost. The North Tower corridor stretched before her, a gauntlet of marble floors that demanded perfection. Lady Morgana, the king's advisor, had her chambers here. The woman who'd arrived 8 months ago wrapped in silk and secrets, who'd charmed her way into the court with a smile sharp enough to gut a man. The woman Lyra recognized the moment she'd stepped through Ironhold's gates. Her hands tightened on the bucket handle. Careful. Don't think about it. Don't remember the screams, the fire, the way her mother's hand went limp in hers as the curse took hold. A door opened ahead. Lyra froze. Don't care what the physicians say. The voice cut through the pre-dawn quiet like a blade. Lady Morgana, her accent honey-smooth and venomous. Increase the dosage. I want him malleable, not coherent. Another voice, male, uncertain. My lady, if he dies, he won't die, you fool. Not yet. I need him compliant for the coronation ceremony. After that, a pause. The sound of liquid pouring. After that, his usefulness expires. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. Footsteps approached the door. She moved, fast, silent, the way 3 years of invisibility had taught her. The servants' alcove was barely 3 feet deep, designed to hold cleaning supplies and people who didn't matter. She wedged herself inside just as Morgana's chamber door swung fully open. Through the gap between the alcove curtain and the wall, Lyra watched. Morgana stepped into the corridor, and even at this ungodly hour, she looked like something from a painting. Dark hair cascading in perfect waves, skin like porcelain, a burgundy robe that probably cost more than Lyra would earn in 10 lifetimes. Beautiful, if you didn't look at the eyes. Lyra had learned to look at eyes. Behind Morgana, a thin man in servant's livery followed, carrying a small wooden box. Lyra recognized him, Peter, one of the king's personal attendants. His hands shook as he clutched the box. Remember, Morgana said softly, her back still to him. 3 drops in his wine with dinner, 2 in his morning tea. Miss a single dose and I'll know. She turned, and her smile would have frozen blood. And then I'll make you drink the whole bottle. Are we clear? Peter nodded so hard his neck might have snapped. Good boy. Morgana patted his cheek like he was a dog. Now go. And if anyone asks, you were never here. She watched him scurry away like a rat fleeing a hawk. Then, for just a moment, her composure cracked. Her beautiful face twisted into something hungry and hate-filled, her fingers curling like claws. Soon, she whispered to the empty corridor. Soon, this frozen shithole will bow, and those pathetic wolf-cursed bastards will watch their precious bloodlines end. Lyra's blood turned to ice. Morgana knew about her brothers, about... The sorceress's head snapped toward the alcove. Lyra stopped breathing entirely, her body locked in place, every muscle screaming at her to run, but running meant noise, and noise meant discovery, and discovery meant... Morgana's eyes narrowed. She took a step toward the alcove. Then a bell chimed from the east wing, the dawn bell, the castle stirring to life. Morgana's expression smoothed back into pleasant neutrality. She adjusted her robe, ran fingers through her perfect hair, and glided away down the corridor like a queen already crowned. Lyra waited 10 full minutes before she dared to move. When she finally emerged, her legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the bucket with shaking hands and forced herself to work. Scrub the floors, empty the chamber pots, replace the candles. Normal. Routine. Invisible. But her mind raced. The king was being poisoned, systematically. And Morgana was planning something that involved Lyra's brothers, still trapped in their wolf forms, still locked in the royal kennels where they'd been kept for 3 years like animals. She wanted to scream, wanted to run to the king's chambers and shake him awake and tell him everything. About Morgana, about the poison, about the curse that had destroyed her family. But she couldn't, because 6 years ago, on the night Morgana burned their estate to ashes and cursed 5 young noblemen into wolves, Lyra had made a choice. A witch, a real one, not the twisted thing Morgana had become, had found her sobbing in the ruins and offered a trade. "Silence for salvation," the old woman had said. "Speak no word, make no sound from your lips, and I will give you the power to break their curse. But the moment you speak, the magic dies. Choose." Lyra had been 17. Her brothers had been screaming in their new wolf forms, mindless with pain and terror. She'd chosen without hesitation. 6 years of silence. 6 years of stitching garments woven from nettle fiber and moonlight and her own blood. One for each brother, each thread requiring absolute concentration and perfect quiet. 6 years of being nobody, nothing, invisible. She was on the 5th garment now. 5 years of work, hidden in a rotted-out tree trunk in the forest beyond the castle walls. 1 more to go. 1 more, and her brothers would be free. But if Morgana killed the king before Lyra finished, no. She couldn't think about that. She finished the North Tower corridor as the sun crept over the eastern mountains. Her hands were raw from the lye soap, her back aching from the constant stooping. But she allowed herself no complaint. Complaints required sound. The servants' dining hall was crowded when she arrived for the morning meal. Lyra took her usual spot in the corner, accepting her portion of thin porridge and stale bread without meeting anyone's eyes. "Poor thing," the whisper carried from 2 tables over. Marna, the head laundress, pitying as always. 3 years and she hasn't made a single sound. Not natural, if you ask me. "Probably simple-minded," another voice added. "You know how some folks are born wrong in the head." Lyra kept her eyes on her bowl. Let them think what they wanted. Simple was safe. Silent was safer. "I heard she was found wandering the woods half dead," someone else chimed in. "Frostbite took her tongue, probably. Can't speak because there's nothing left to speak with." Close enough to the truth to sting. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Around her the servants' hall buzzed with gossip. Lady whoever was sleeping with Lord whomever, the king, had taken ill again last night. Preparations for the spring tournament were underway. And threading through it all, reverent whispers about Lady Morgana. "So generous, donating to the orphanage. Did you see her at the feast? Absolutely radiant. The king seems quite taken with her. Wouldn't be surprised if there's an announcement soon." Lyra's fingers tightened on her spoon. They couldn't see it. The whole castle, hell, the whole kingdom, had fallen under Morgana's spell. Beautiful, charitable Lady Morgana, advisor to the king, friend to the poor, paragon of virtue. Lyra wanted to grab them all and shake them until their teeth rattled. Wanted to scream that the woman they praised had murdered her parents in cold blood, had cursed 5 innocent men into beasts, had burned everything Lyra loved to ash and bone. But she couldn't. So she swallowed her rage with her porridge and stood to begin her next round of chores. The day crawled forward. Lyra scrubbed, swept, hauled, and endured. She cleaned the great hall where petitioners waited to see the king. She polished the armor in the guards' quarters. She changed linens in guest chambers that hadn't seen guests in months. And everywhere she went, she listened. The guards talked about increased patrols along the northern border. The kitchen staff complained about Lady Morgana's demanding dietary requirements. The stable boys whispered about the 6 wolves in the royal kennels. Beautiful creatures, they said, with eyes too human to be natural. Lyra's brothers. She wasn't supposed to go near the kennels. Servants had their designated areas, and the royal animal quarters were off limits to anyone below a certain rank. But 3 years ago, when the king's hunting party had returned with 6 wild wolves they'd captured in the forest near Ravencrest, Lyra's family estate, she'd known immediately. She'd recognized Garrett's scarred left ear, Finn's distinctive russet coat, Marcus's massive size. Her brothers, reduced to beasts. Getting assigned to kennel duty had taken careful maneuvering. A strategically spilled bucket near the Master of Hounds, a fortuitous accident that laid up the usual kennel maid for 2 weeks. Suddenly, Lyra was the most convenient replacement. She'd been cleaning their cages 3 times a week ever since. As the afternoon sun slanted through high windows, Lyra made her way to the kennels with her cleaning supplies. The Master of Hounds, a gruff man named Torben, barely glanced at her. "They're restless today," he grunted. "Mind the big one. He nearly took Jens's hand off this morning." Lyra nodded and slipped past him. The royal kennels were surprisingly pleasant, spacious, clean, with fresh straw and good ventilation. The king, whatever his faults, didn't believe in mistreating animals, which was ironic, considering he didn't realize he was keeping 5 cursed noblemen in cages. The 6th wolf was an addition from 2 years ago, a female the hunting party had found in the same territory. Lyra didn't know who she'd been before, but the she-wolf had attached herself to Garrett's pack immediately. 6 cages. 6 sets of amber eyes that tracked Lyra's movement with unsettling intelligence. She set down her bucket and began her work, moving to the first cage. Garrett's cage. The massive gray wolf watched her approach. Where a normal wolf would have growled or backed away, Garrett pressed against the bars, a low whine building in his throat. Lyra glanced toward the door. Torben had wandered off, probably to his usual afternoon nap. They were alone. She reached through the bars and placed her hand on Garrett's head. Her oldest brother. 28 now, if you counted the years in wolf form. He'd been engaged to be married when Morgana's curse hit. Lyra wondered sometimes if his fiancée still waited, or if she'd moved on, thinking him dead. Garrett leaned into her touch, his eyes, so painfully human, welling with frustrated tears that wolves shouldn't be able to cry. "I know," Lyra wanted to say. "I know it hurts. I know you're trapped. Just a little longer. Please, just a little longer." But she couldn't say any of it. Instead, she pulled a small scrap of cloth from her pocket, rough nettle fiber, woven with painstaking care. She'd finished Garrett's garment last month. This was just a sample, proof that her work continued. She pressed it to his nose, letting him scent it. Recognition flared in his eyes. Then she moved to the next cage. Finn. 26, the family joker, now reduced to restless pacing and howls that sounded too much like sobs. She showed him his scrap of cloth. Let him know she hadn't forgotten. Marcus, the youngest at 19. Thomas and Willem, the twins at 24. Each of them received the same small comfort. A touch, a reminder, a silent promise. The she-wolf, whom Lyra had privately named Ash for her gray-black coat, watched everything with wary intelligence. When Lyra approached her cage last, Ash didn't press forward like the others, but she didn't retreat either. Lyra showed her the cloth anyway. "Soon," she mouthed, though no sound emerged. She was replacing the straw in Marcus's cage when she heard voices outside. "Absolutely magnificent specimens," a cultured voice was saying. Male, aristocratic. "I've never seen wolves of this size." "Are you certain they're not part of some exotic breeding program?" "Wild caught, Lord Aldrich." That was Torben, his tone obsequious. "The king himself led the hunt that captured them." Lyra's hand stilled. "Lord Aldrich." One of the king's chief advisors, and notably one of Morgana's most vocal supporters at court. "Fascinating." Footsteps approached the kennel door. "I'd like to see them up close, if you don't mind." "Of course, my lord, though I should warn you, the mute girl is in there cleaning. Pay her no mind, she's harmless." The door swung open. Lord Aldrich swept in, all burgundy velvet and jeweled rings. He was handsome in a predatory way, with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. Lyra had seen him at court functions, always at Morgana's elbow, always whispering in ears that mattered. Behind him came 2 other men. One was Peter, the servant Lyra had seen receiving the poison box this morning. The other was a stranger, tall, broad-shouldered, with the bearing of a warrior, and eyes that missed nothing. That last man made Lyra nervous in a way she couldn't quite define. Remarkable, Aldrich murmured, approaching the cages. The wolves reacted immediately. Garrett snarling, Finn backing into the corner, Marcus's hackles rising. Such spirit, such intelligence in their eyes. Almost human, wouldn't you say? The stranger said nothing, just watched, studied. Aldrich moved closer to Garrett's cage, and Garrett lunged at the bars with a roar that made Torben jump. "Careful, my lord," the kennel master yelped, but Aldrich just laughed. "Oh, he's magnificent. Tell me, are they ever let out? For exercise, perhaps?" "Once a week, my lord. In the enclosed run. Under heavy guard, of course." "Of course." Aldrich's gaze drifted past the wolves to where Lyra stood motionless by Marcus's cage, rake in hand. "And who's this?" "Nobody, my lord," Torben said quickly. "Just the mute girl. She cleans the cages. Harmless and simple, as I said." Aldrich's eyes lingered on her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Lyra kept her gaze down, shoulders hunched, playing the part she'd perfected. Invisible, incompetent, beneath notice. "Simple," Aldrich repeated slowly. Then he smiled. "Yes, I suppose she must be." He turned back to the cages, and Lyra released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The stranger, though, the quiet one. He was still watching her. Their eyes met for just a second, his the color of winter ice, startlingly pale against sun-bronzed skin, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or warning. Then he looked away, and Lyra told herself she'd imagined it. "I'll mention to Lady Morgana what impressive creatures these are," Aldrich was saying. "She has such an interest in rare things. Perhaps she'd like to view them herself." "No, no, no, no!" But Lyra could only stand there, silent and helpless, as Aldrich swept out with his entourage, already planning to bring the woman who'd cursed her brothers right to their cages. When they were gone, Lyra's hands shook so badly she could barely grip the rake. She forced herself to finish her work, forced herself to walk calmly back to the servants' quarters when she was done, forced herself to eat dinner, to sit through evening prayers, to endure another round of pitying glances and dismissive whispers. But inside, she was screaming. Midnight found her slipping through the castle's forgotten passages, the servants' corridors that the nobility pretended didn't exist. She'd learned them all in 3 years. Every shortcut, every blind spot, every route that could get her from one side of the fortress to the other without being seen. Tonight, she needed to reach the forest. The garments were hidden in an old oak tree, a 15-minute walk from the castle walls. Lyra made the journey 3 times a week, always at night, always in secret. She'd bring the current piece she was working on, stitched with nettle fiber she harvested from the deep woods where no one ventured. Nettle fiber. The witch had been specific. It had to be wild nettle gathered by her own hands, spun into thread under moonlight, woven into cloth with her own blood mixed into the fibers. Each garment took approximately a year to complete. 5 done. 1 remaining. Willem's garment. The last piece of the puzzle. The night was cold enough to burn her lungs. Spring in the northern kingdoms was a lie. It was still winter here, just winter with slightly less snow. Lyra wrapped her thin shawl tighter and hurried across the open ground between the castle and the tree line. The guards were predictable. She'd timed their rotations months ago. 60 seconds of blind spot near the eastern postern gate. That's all she needed. She counted as she ran. 58, 59, 60, into the trees. The forest swallowed her like a living thing. Darkness pressed close, broken only by weak moonlight filtering through bare branches. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. Closer, something rustled in the undergrowth. Lyra didn't slow down. The oak tree stood in a small clearing, ancient and hollow, its trunk split by some long-ago lightning strike. Lyra dropped to her knees beside it and reached into the hollow, her fingers finding the oilcloth bundle she'd hidden there. She pulled it out and unwrapped it carefully. 5 completed garments, folded with reverent care. Each one a masterpiece of suffering, woven from plants that burned the skin, dyed with her own blood, stitched with fingers that had bled and blistered and healed and bled again. And the 6th, still in progress. Willem's shirt, 3/4 finished. Lyra settled against the tree trunk and pulled out her spindle and the fresh nettle she'd gathered last week. Her fingers moved automatically, spinning the vicious fibers into thread. The nettles stung even through the calluses she'd developed, but she barely felt it anymore. Pain was just another kind of silence. She worked for 2 hours, her hands moving in the moonlight, her mind drifting to dangerous places. The king was being poisoned. That changed everything. Lyra had seen him around the castle, of course. Everyone had. King Alderon Thorn, 32 years old, ruler of the Northern Reach. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that he wore tied back and eyes the color of steel. Handsome, if you cared about that sort of thing. More importantly, fair, just. The kind of ruler who actually listened to petitions from common folk, who'd reduced taxes 3 times in his 10-year reign, who'd personally led the defense when raiders hit the border settlements. A good man, by all accounts, which was probably why Morgana wanted him dead. Lyra's hands stilled on the spindle. She couldn't let that happen. If Morgana killed the king and seized control, because that's clearly what this was building toward, then everything would fall apart. The kingdom would be ruled by the woman who'd destroyed Lyra's family. Her brothers would never be freed. And whatever Morgana was planning, whatever endgame had brought her to Ironhold in the first place, would come to fruition. But what could Lyra do? She couldn't speak, couldn't warn anyone, couldn't explain about Morgana's true nature without revealing her own identity. And if she did that, if people knew she was Lyra Voss, last surviving child of the disgraced Voss family, she'd be arrested immediately. Her family had been accused of treason 6 years ago. Falsely, of course. Morgana had planted the evidence, manipulated the investigation, and made sure the Voss name became synonymous with betrayal. When the estate burned, everyone assumed the family had died. Lyra had let them keep assuming. Dead girls made convenient ghosts, but alive and identified? She'd be executed for crimes she didn't commit. No. She had to stay silent, had to stay hidden, had to finish the last garment and free her brothers, and then, maybe then, she could find a way to stop Morgana. 3 more months. That's what she estimated. 3 months to finish Willem's garment, and then on the next full moon she could perform the reversal ritual. 3 months. Could the king survive 3 more months of poison? Lyra pressed her palm against the oak's rough bark and closed her eyes. The witch who'd given her this power had also given her a warning. The moment you speak, the magic dies. But more than that, every day of silence you've endured will turn to ash. The garments will unravel. Your brothers will be lost forever. 6 years of silence. 6 years that would mean nothing if she broke now. A branch snapped behind her. Lyra spun, her hand instinctively reaching for the small knife she kept hidden in her boot. A wolf stepped into the clearing. No, not a wolf. Too big, too aware. Its coat was silver gray, almost glowing in the moonlight, and its eyes... Lyra's heart stopped. Those were human eyes, familiar eyes. Garrett. But that was impossible. Her brothers were locked in the kennels, and even if one had escaped, they couldn't have tracked her here, couldn't have... The wolf's form shimmered. Lyra watched, frozen, as the animal's shape rippled like water. Bones cracked, fur receded, and suddenly it wasn't a wolf standing before her, but a man, naked, scarred, with silver-gray hair and eyes that held 6 years of anguish. Not Garrett, King Alderon Thorn. The king stared at her. She stared back. And then he smiled, a bitter, exhausted expression that held no humor at all. "Well," he said, his voice rough from disuse or pain or both, "I guess we both have secrets." Lyra's mouth opened, closed. No sound emerged. The king, the wolf, the cursed, impossible king took a step toward her. "I know you," he said slowly. "You're the mute servant, the one who cleans the kennels." His eyes dropped to the nettle garments in her lap, and understanding dawned across his face. "The one who's been watching my pack like their family." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her want to run. "So tell me," King Alderon said, and there was something dangerous in his voice now, something that reminded her he was a predator even in human skin. "Who exactly are you, little ghost? And why do you look at 6 cursed wolves like you're trying to save their souls?" Lyra clutched the garments to her chest and did the only thing she could do. She stayed silent and prayed that the secrets bleeding out into the moonlight wouldn't destroy them both. The king stood there, naked and scarred and impossibly real, waiting for an answer Lyra couldn't give. Her mind raced through 1,000 calculations. Run, he'd catch her. Fight, laughable. Lie, impossible without a voice. The nettle garments burned against her chest like accusation, and she could feel her brother's curse humming in the air between them, recognizing its mirror. "You're not going to answer, are you?" Alderon's voice was softer now, almost gentle. He didn't move closer, just stood there in the moonlight like some ancient statue come to life. "Can't or won't?" Lyra's jaw tightened. She met his eyes, those winter-pale eyes that should have been terrifying but somehow weren't, and held his gaze. He studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a broken sound, raw at the edges. "Right, the mute thing. I'd forgotten." He ran a hand through his hair, and Lyra noticed the tremor in his fingers. "Though I suppose that makes you the perfect confessor, doesn't it? Can't repeat what you can't say." He moved then, but not toward her. Instead, he walked to a fallen log at the clearing's edge and sat down heavily, like his legs had finally given out. "I turn into a wolf 3 nights a week," he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Have been for the past 8 months. Started the same night Lady Morgana arrived at court. Coincidence, I'm sure." Lyra's breath caught. 8 months. The same time Morgana had slithered her way into Ironhold. "At first I thought I was going mad," Alderon continued. He wasn't looking at her anymore, just staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "Waking up in strange places, covered in blood and dirt, with gaps in my memory. Then one night I stayed conscious through the change. Felt every bone break and remake itself. Felt my mind split between human and beast." His hands curled into fists. "That's when I knew. Someone cursed me." The words hung in the cold air. Lyra clutched the garments tighter, her mind working frantically. Morgana had cursed the king. Of course she had. Control him, weaken him, drive him slowly insane while poisoning him in his human form. It was elegant, really. Vicious and thorough, and exactly the kind of multi-layered cruelty Morgana excelled at. "I've been trying to figure out who for months," Alderon said. "Investigated everyone at court, searched for enemies, reviewed every decision I've made that might have angered someone enough for this." He laughed again, that broken sound. "Never occurred to me to look at the beautiful advisor who's been oh so helpful with running the kingdom while I've been ill." So he knew. Or suspected, at least. Lyra's estimation of him rose a notch. "But you," he said, and now he was looking at her again. "You knew the moment you saw those wolves in the kennels, didn't you? I've watched you these past months, the way you look at them, the way they respond to you, like your pack." Lyra's throat worked uselessly. She wanted to tell him everything about her brothers, about Morgana's first massacre, about the curse and the garments and the 6 years of silence that stood between her and salvation. But the words stayed locked behind her teeth, and all she could do was stare at him with desperate, frustrated eyes. Alderon stood up slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "Whatever you're doing out here with those, He gestured at the nettle cloth. "Those are curse breakers, aren't they? I can feel the magic in them." He took one careful step closer. "Are they for the wolves in my kennels?" Lyra nodded. Once. Sharp. "Are the wolves—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Are they human? Cursed? Like me?" Another nod. "Are they your family?" Lyra's eyes burned. She nodded a third time. Something shifted in Alderon's expression. The wariness didn't disappear, but it softened into something almost like understanding. "How long have you been silent?" She held up 6 fingers. 6 years. He breathed out slowly. That's a long time to carry a secret." He glanced at the garments again. "How many do you need?" She held up 6 fingers again, then 5, then pointed at the incomplete shirt in her lap and held up 1 finger. 6 total, 5 done, 1 left. He was quick, she'd give him that. "How long until it's finished?" Lyra hesitated, then held up 3 fingers. 3 months. Alderon's jaw tightened. "I don't know if I have 3 months." The words hit like a fist to the gut. Lyra's eyes snapped to his face, questioning. "The poison," he said simply. "You know about that too, don't you? I can see it in your eyes." Yes, I know I'm being poisoned. I've known for 2 months since I started finding the residue in my wine, but I can't figure out who's administering it, and I can't let on that I know because the moment I do, they'll change tactics. He smiled grimly. Politics. Can't even trust your own food tasters. Lyra's mind flashed to Peter, the nervous servant with the wooden box. She needed to tell him, needed to warn him. But how? Alderaan was watching her again, reading her face like a book. You know who it is? She nodded frantically. Can you show me? Write it, maybe? Lyra looked around the clearing wildly, then dropped to her knees and began scratching in the dirt with a stick. Her hands shook as she carved out letters, P-E-T-Y-R. Then, beneath it, S-E-R-V-A-N-T. And finally, the word that mattered most, M-O-R-G-A-N-N-A. She looked up to find Alderaan's face had gone very still. Morgana, he repeated softly. Of course. Who else would have the skill, the access, the sheer calculated patience? He crouched beside her, staring at the words in the dirt. Peter's one of my personal attendants. He prepares my tea every morning. His hand clenched on his knee. How long have you known? Lyra held up one finger, then pointed at the sky and made a rising sun gesture. Since this morning. Alderaan closed his eyes briefly. You heard something. She nodded and began drawing again. A box. Drops falling from it. 3 drops, then 2. She pointed at wine, then tea. 3 drops in wine, 2 in tea, Alderaan murmured. Consistent dosing. She's keeping me weak enough to be malleable, but not so sick that people get suspicious. He stood abruptly and started pacing, his movements restless and wolf-like. That's why I can barely hold human form some days. Why the transformations are getting worse. The poison and the curse are feeding each other. Lyra watched him pace, her heart hammering. The pieces were falling into place faster than she'd expected, and she wasn't sure if that was good or terrifying. If Morgana cursed me and the wolves in the kennels, Alderaan said, still pacing, then she's got a pattern, a vendetta maybe. He stopped and looked at Lyra sharply. Who were your family? Before the curse? Lyra's stomach dropped. This was dangerous ground. But she'd already revealed so much, and he deserved to know what he was dealing with. She scratched in the dirt again. V-O-S-S. Alderaan went very, very still. Voss. The traitor family from 6 years ago. The estate that burned. His eyes widened. The family that was wiped out to the last child. Lyra shook her head hard and pointed at herself. You're supposed to be dead, Alderaan said slowly. Everyone thinks you're dead, which means... He turned away, pressing his palms against his temples. Which means the charges against your family were probably as false as Morgana's smile. Which means she framed you, murdered your parents, cursed your brothers, and made sure no one would ever question it. He spun back. Why? What did your family have that she wanted? Lyra wished desperately that she could speak. How could she explain 6 years of history in dirt drawings? She settled for scratching out L-A-N-D, then P-O-W-E-R, and finally B-L-O-O-D-L-I-N-E. Your family's bloodline, Alderaan murmured. Voss is an old name, one of the original founding families. Your line goes back to the first kings, doesn't it? Before the kingdoms split. Lyra nodded. Her family had never made much of their ancient heritage. They'd been comfortable nobles, nothing more. But the blood ran true, and in some circles that mattered. So Morgana eliminates an old bloodline, takes their lands, and positions herself at court under a false identity, Alderaan said. Then 8 months ago, she shows up here and starts the same process with me. Curse, poison, manipulate. His face hardened. She's collecting kingdoms. The word sent ice through Lyra's veins because yes, that's exactly what this was. Morgana wasn't just power-hungry or vengeful. She was systematic, methodical, building something piece by piece, corpse by corpse. A twig snapped in the forest behind them. Alderaan's head whipped around, his body tensing into a fighter's stance. Lyra scrambled to her feet, shoving the garments back into their oilcloth and clutching them to her chest. Someone's coming, Alderaan said quietly. Multiple people. I can smell them. Of course he could. wolf senses, even in human form. You need to run, he continued, his voice urgent. If they find you here with me like this... But it was already too late. 3 men stepped into the clearing, and Lyra's blood turned to ice when she recognized the first one. Lord Aldrich, immaculate as always, even in traveling clothes. Behind him, 2 guards with crossbows. Your Majesty, Aldrich said smoothly, not even blinking at the king's nakedness. We've been searching for you. You missed the evening council meeting, and when we checked your chambers... His eyes drifted to Lyra, and his smile sharpened. I see you've been occupied. Alderaan didn't move, didn't show even a flicker of embarrassment. Lord Aldrich, I was not aware my evening activities required your approval. Of course not, sire. Aldrich's tone was perfectly respectful and completely poisonous. Though perhaps choosing a mute servant for your recreational needs is beneath a king's dignity? The implication hung in the air like rotting meat. Lyra felt her face burn with humiliation and rage, but she kept her eyes down, playing the part. My recreational needs are none of your concern, Alderaan said coldly, and I'll thank you to keep your observations to yourself. Naturally, Aldrich's smile never wavered, though I feel obligated to mention that Lady Morgana has been quite worried about your recent wanderings. She's devoted so much time to your care. It would pain her to think you were engaging in activities that might compromise your health. The threat was clear. Tell Morgana everything. Alderaan's expression didn't change. I'm sure Lady Morgana has better things to do than concern herself with my private affairs, as do you, Lord Aldrich. Was there something specific you needed, or did you simply enjoy the walk? The 2 men stared at each other, and Lyra could feel the power dynamic shifting like ice on a spring river. Aldrich technically had no authority to question the king's actions, but he had Morgana's backing, and in the current political climate, that was almost as good as the crown itself. Actually, Aldrich said slowly, there is a matter requiring your attention. The northern border lords are demanding an audience. Apparently there's been increased activity from the Shadowlands, raids, kidnappings. They want military support. Then we'll discuss it at tomorrow's council meeting. They're quite insistent, Your Majesty. They've traveled a long way. Then they can wait until morning. Alderaan's voice had gone flat and hard. I believe I've made myself clear, Lord Aldrich. Unless there's an active invasion happening right now, this conversation is over. Aldrich's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, sire. Though I should mention that several council members have expressed concern about your recent behavior. The illness, the missed meetings, the memory gaps. Some are beginning to question whether you're fit to rule. There it was. The real threat. Lyra's hands clenched on the oilcloth bundle. Are they? Alderaan's voice was soft now, dangerously soft. And I suppose you've been quick to defend me? I've done my best to reassure them, Aldrich said, but perhaps if you were more present at court functions, it would help quiet the rumors. Rumors you've likely started. Aldrich pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. Your Majesty, I'm wounded. I've been nothing but loyal. Loyal to whom, I wonder? The clearing crackled with tension. The 2 guards looked uncomfortable, their crossbows wavering slightly. Lyra stood frozen, barely breathing, the nettle garments hidden behind her back. Then Alderaan smiled, and it was all teeth. You're right, of course. I've been neglecting my duties. Tell the border lords I'll see them first thing tomorrow morning. And inform Lady Morgana that I appreciate her concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own health. Of course, Your Majesty. Aldrich bowed, stiff and precise. His eyes flicked once more to Lyra, cataloging her presence, and she knew with sick certainty that this moment would be reported back to Morgana within the hour. We'll leave you to your evening. He turned and swept from the clearing, his guards following. Their footsteps faded into the forest, but Lyra knew better than to relax. They'd be watching, waiting. Alderaan waited until the sounds disappeared completely before he spoke. That was a problem. Lyra nodded grimly. Problem was an understatement. They'd been seen together. Aldrich would twist it into something sordid, and Morgana would use it however she saw fit. You need to get back to the castle, Alderaan said. Different route than usual. They'll be watching the direct paths. Lyra pointed at him, then at the clearing, her expression questioning. I'll transform and run back as a wolf. Easier to explain why I'm not in my chambers. The beast got loose again, poor cursed king. So tragic. His smile was bitter. Go, now, before they circle back. But Lyra hesitated. There was so much more they needed to discuss. The poison, the curse, Morgana's endgame. 3 months, Alderaan said, reading her mind. You need 3 months to finish the last garment. I need to survive 3 months without Morgana realizing I know what she's doing. He stepped closer, and even naked and scarred, he radiated authority. We're going to have to trust each other. Can you do that? Lyra looked at him, really looked at him, saw the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the barely healed wounds that marked his transformations, the desperate hope that he was trying very hard to hide. A king cursed and poisoned and fighting alone against an enemy he barely understood, just like her. She nodded once, firm. Good. Alderaan's expression softened slightly. I'll find a way to communicate with you, safely, without raising suspicion. He glanced at the tree hollow where she'd hidden the garments. Keep working. If those can break the curse on your brothers, maybe they can help me too. Lyra shook her head hard and held up 6 fingers, then pointed at her brother's direction. These garments were keyed specifically to her family's curse, woven with their blood and her sacrifice. They wouldn't work on Alderaan. Understanding crossed his face. Different curse, different solution. Right, he sighed. Then I'll just have to hold on until you can free your brothers. 5 trained warriors and a king against 1 sorceress. Better odds than I've had in months. If they all survived that long. Lyra tucked the oilcloth bundle into her shirt and gave Alderaan one last look. Then she turned and ran, taking the long route through the dense forest, avoiding the paths she normally used. Behind her, she heard bones crack and reshape, and a wolf's howl split the night. The return journey took nearly an hour, circling wide to approach the castle from the western side. By the time Lyra slipped back through the postern gate, her feet were torn and bleeding, her shawl was in tatters, and dawn was threatening the eastern horizon. She made it to the servants' quarters just as the wake-up bell rang. The other servants were already stirring, grumbling about the early hour and the day's work ahead. Lyra slipped into the washroom, cleaned the worst of the dirt and blood off her feet, and changed into a fresh work dress from her tiny trunk. The nettle garments went into a hidden pocket she'd sewn into the trunk's lining. No one noticed her. No one ever did. But when she made her way to the kitchens for breakfast, she felt eyes on her back. Turned to find Marna, the head laundress, watching her with an odd expression. Late night? The older woman asked quietly. Lyra kept her face blank and shrugged. Marna studied her for a moment longer, then shook her head. Just be careful, girl. Whatever you're mixed up in, it's written all over you. And people in this castle have long memories for things that don't concern them. A warning. Lyra nodded and ducked her head in thanks. The day that followed was one of the longest of her life. Every moment felt like walking on a blade's edge, waiting for someone to grab her arm and drag her before Morgana for interrogation. But the hours crawled by without incident. She scrubbed floors, she changed linens, she emptied chamber pots. Normal, routine, invisible. Except it wasn't normal anymore, because now she had an ally, however unexpected. Now someone else knew the truth. Now there was hope. And hope was the most dangerous thing of all. The afternoon found her assigned to the Great Hall, polishing the massive oak tables where the council would meet tomorrow. Other servants worked around her, and the low hum of gossip filled the air. Said the king was found wandering the grounds again last night. Lady Morgana's beside herself with worry. Heard Lord Aldrich caught him with some servant girl. Lyra's hand stilled on the cloth. So it was already spreading. That was faster than she'd expected. Probably that mute one, another voice chimed in. The simple girl who does the kennels. I always said there was something off about her. Oh, come now, that poor thing. She's barely got 2 thoughts to rub together. Still, His Majesty's standards have certainly declined. Laughter. Ugly and knowing. Lyra kept her eyes down and continued polishing, but her face burned. Personally, I think the king's losing his mind, the first voice said, lowering to a stage whisper. The illness, the wandering, the strange behavior. My cousin serves on the council, and he says some of the lords are talking about a regency. A regency? But the king has no heir. Exactly. which means Lady Morgana would likely serve as regent until a suitable successor is chosen. She's already running half the kingdom anyway. Lyra's blood ran cold. A regency. Of course, if Morgana could convince the council that Alderaan was mentally unfit to rule, she could seize power without ever having to actually kill him. Keep him alive but imprisoned, a puppet king, while she consolidated control. Elegant, vicious, perfectly Morgana. "Excuse me." A male voice cut through the gossip. "I'm looking for the girl who tends the wolf kennels." Lyra's head snapped up. The stranger from yesterday stood in the doorway, the quiet one who'd accompanied Aldrich. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of scars that spoke of serious combat experience. His pale eyes found Lyra immediately. "You," he said, "come with me." The other servants scattered like startled birds, suddenly very busy with tasks elsewhere. Lyra stood slowly, her mind racing through possibilities. Was this Aldrich's play? Morgana's? Or something else entirely? The man didn't touch her, just turned and walked toward the corridor. After a moment, Lyra followed. He led her through the castle's winding halls, taking turns that made no sense for any destination Lyra knew. Finally, they reached a small sitting room, empty and windowless. The man closed the door behind them and leaned against it, studying her with those unsettling pale eyes. "My name is Kael," he said. "I'm the captain of the King's Shadow Guard, or I was, before His Majesty disbanded us 3 months ago on Lady Morgana's advice." His smile was sharp. Funny how that worked out. Lyra watched him warily, her hand drifting toward the small knife in her boot. "Relax," Kael said. "If I wanted to hurt you, you'd already be bleeding. I'm here because the king sent me a message this morning, very carefully worded, very specific." He pulled a small folded paper from his pocket. "He wants me to tell you that he's secured Peter in protective custody. The servant is singing like a bird about who gave him the poison and how long it's been going on." Lyra's eyebrows shot up. That was fast, dangerously fast. "He also wants me to tell you that he's moving up the timeline," Kael continued. "Whatever you're working on, you have 1 month now, not 3. Morgana's accelerating her plans. The council meeting tomorrow is a trap. She's going to push for a formal investigation into his mental fitness." 1 month. Lyra's stomach dropped. 1 month to finish a garment that should take 3. "Can you do it?" Kael asked bluntly. Lyra's hands moved before she could stop them, gesturing frantically. "Not enough time. Impossible. The magic required precision, care, patience." "I'll take that as a maybe," Kael said dryly. "Look, I don't know what you're doing or why, and frankly I don't care, but I've served King Alderaan for 10 years, and I know when something's rotting at the core of this kingdom. Whatever game Lady Morgana's playing, it ends with a lot of good people dead." He pushed off the door and stepped closer. "The king trusts you. That's good enough for me. So I'm offering my services, protection, information, resources, whatever you need." Lyra stared at him. Another ally. 2 in less than 24 hours. It felt like a trap, but the alternative was facing Morgana alone, and that was suicide. She nodded slowly. "Good," Kael said. "Now, I need you to understand something. The next month is going to be hell. Morgana knows the king's getting suspicious. Peter's disappearance will confirm it. She's going to move fast and hard, which means you're in danger. Anyone associated with the king is a target." Lyra's jaw tightened. She'd been a target for 6 years. What was 1 more month? "There's a safe house in the city," Kael continued. "An old blacksmith shop, abandoned but secure. If things go sideways, get there. I'll find you." He pressed a small iron key into her palm. "Memorize the location. 3 streets south of the fish market. Red door, iron anchor above the frame." Lyra pocketed the key and nodded. "One more thing," Kael said, and his expression turned grave. "The king asked me to give you this." He pulled out a second paper, this one sealed with wax. "He said you'd understand." Lyra broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Inside, in a bold masculine scrawl, were 3 words, "I believe you." And beneath that, a simple drawing, 6 wolves running together. Something in Lyra's chest cracked. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it against her heart. When she looked up, Kyle was watching her with something almost like sympathy. He's a good man, he said quietly. One of the best I've known. Don't let him die for trusting the wrong person. Then he opened the door and gestured her out. Go, before someone notices you're missing, and be careful, Morgana has eyes everywhere. Lyra slipped past him and back into the corridor, her mind whirling with new information and impossible timelines. 1 month. 4 weeks to finish work that should take 12. She'd have to work faster, take more risks, spend every spare moment in the forest, weaving and stitching and bleeding into the nettle fibers. The alternative was watching Alderaan fall, watching her brothers die in their cursed forms, watching Morgana win. Not acceptable. The rest of the day blurred past. Lyra moved through her duties mechanically, her mind already planning. Fewer hours sleeping, skip meals, work through the night if she had to. Evening came, and with it, the announcement. The king would address the full court at tomorrow's council meeting. Attendance mandatory for all household staff. Morgana's trap sprung. That night, Lyra didn't go to the forest. Instead, she stayed in the servants' quarters and pulled out the hidden garments, working by candlelight while the other servants slept. Her fingers flew over the nettle fiber, weaving and stitching with desperate speed. She worked until her eyes burned and her fingers bled, and the candle guttered down to nothing. And in the darkness, she heard a wolf's howl from the direction of the kennels, long and mournful and achingly human. Her brothers, sensing the shift in the wind, knowing somehow that time was running out. Lyra pressed her bloody fingers to her lips and swore a silent oath. 1 month. She'd finish the garments in 1 month, or she'd die trying. The court gathered in the great hall like crows to a carcass. Lyra stood at the back with the other servants, her stomach churning with dread. She'd seen executions that felt less ominous than this. The council sat at the high table, 12 lords and ladies representing the kingdom's great houses. Morgana was there too, of course, positioned at the king's right hand, resplendent in midnight blue silk. She looked concerned, supportive, the picture of a devoted advisor. Lyra wanted to claw her eyes out. King Alderaan entered last, and the room fell silent. He looked terrible, pale, drawn, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and pain. But he walked steady, his spine straight, his expression calm. "My lords, my ladies," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "Thank you for gathering on such short notice. I know there have been concerns about my health and my ability to lead." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Morgana's face was a mask of sympathetic worry. "I want to address those concerns directly," Alderaan continued. "Yes, I have been ill. Yes, I have struggled. But I assure you I am fit to rule, and I have no intention of stepping down." Lord Aldrich rose from his seat. "Your Majesty, with all respect, your recent behavior suggests otherwise. The missed meetings, the memory gaps, the—" He paused delicately. "Inappropriate conduct with servants. These are not the actions of a sound mind." The crowd stirred. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides. "Inappropriate conduct?" Alderaan's smile was cold. "You mean the fact that I was seen speaking with a member of my household staff? Since when is that a crime?" "It's not the speaking that concerns us, sire," another lord chimed in. "It's the pattern, the erratic behavior, the inability to maintain focus. Several of us believe that perhaps a temporary regency—" "Regency," Alderaan cut him off. "How convenient. And who precisely would serve as regent?" Silence, heavy and damning. Then Morgana rose and every eye turned to her. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "no one wants to strip you of your crown. We're simply worried about you. You've been under such strain dealing with the curse and the illness." "What curse?" Alderaan's voice was sharp. Morgana blinked, her expression perfectly innocent. "Why, the rumors, of course. Some say you've been cursed by dark magic. That's why you transform—" She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Forgive me. I shouldn't have said that." But of course she should have. That's exactly what this was. Forcing Alderaan to either confirm the curse publicly or deny it and look like he was hiding something. The hall erupted in whispers. "Is it true?" someone called out. "Has the king been cursed?" Dark magic in the palace. Alderaan held up a hand and the room fell silent again. "Yes," he said simply. I have been cursed. For the past 8 months, I have transformed into a wolf 3 nights a week. I did not speak of it because I was trying to find the source and break it myself. Chaos. The lords erupted in shouting, demands for explanation, accusations of witchcraft and weakness. And through it all, Morgana stood there, her face a picture of shock and concern, while her eyes glittered with triumph. Order! Alderon's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. I said order! The hall fell quiet again, but the damage was done. Lyra could see it in the faces around her. The doubt, the fear, the calculation. A cursed king was a weak king. I propose a formal investigation, Lord Aldrich said into the silence, to determine the source of the curse and whether His Majesty is capable of ruling while afflicted. Seconded, another lord called out. Thirded. The votes came fast, a cascade of hands rising in support. Lyra watched the trap close around Alderon's throat and felt sick with helplessness. Then Kael stepped forward from his position by the wall. I object. Every head turned. Captain Kael, Morgana said smoothly, you have no vote in this council. No, but I have information. Kael's voice was hard. The curse afflicting His Majesty is not random. It's targeted, specific, which means someone in this room knows exactly who cast it. Dangerous silence. That's a serious accusation, Aldrich said carefully. It's a serious situation. Kael's pale eyes swept the room. I've been investigating for the past month, and I found some very interesting connections. Connections between certain council members and known practitioners of dark magic. Connections involving money, favors, and, he smiled without warmth, recent arrivals at court. Morgana's face didn't change, but Lyra saw her fingers tighten on the table's edge. These are wild claims, Morgana said. Do you have proof? I have Peter's testimony, Kael said bluntly. The king's personal servant, the one who's been poisoning him for the past 8 months on someone's orders. The hall exploded. Lyra's heart hammered as she watched Morgana's mask finally crack. Just for a second, a flicker of rage and calculation crossing her face before the concerned advisor slid back into place. Poisoning? Morgana gasped. This is outrageous. Captain Kael, you're clearly unwell. I'm perfectly well, my lady. As is Peter, who's currently in protective custody, and very eager to talk about the woman who gave him a wooden box full of poison and threatened to murder his family if he didn't follow her instructions. The guards at the doors shifted, hands moving to weapons. The council members looked at each other uncertainly. Aldrich had gone very pale, and Alderon stood at the center of it all, watching Morgana with the cold focus of a predator. I think, the king said softly, we need to have a very thorough conversation, Lady Morgana, about cursed wolves and poisoned wine and noble families that burned 6 years ago. Morgana's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're implying, Your Majesty. I'm implying you're a murderer and a traitor, Alderon said flatly, and you're under arrest. Morgana laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh or a defensive one. It was genuine amusement, rich and dark and completely unafraid. Oh, Alderon, she said, and her voice had changed, dropped the honey-sweet advisor tone, and revealed something colder underneath. You really think it's that simple? She raised her hand, and power exploded through the hall like a shockwave. The shockwave hit like a physical blow. Lords and ladies flew backward from the table, chairs clattering, bodies slamming into walls. The guards at the doors dropped like puppets with cut strings. Even Kael staggered, catching himself against a pillar. Only Alderon remained standing, his jaw set, fighting against the wave of raw magic that pressed down on the hall like a millstone. And Lyra. She felt the power wash over her, hot and vicious, but it slid off like water off oiled leather. The witch's gift, 6 years of silence had woven protections into her very bones. Magic couldn't touch her. Not Morgana's magic, anyway. Morgana's eyes found her immediately. Recognition flared, then something darker. Well, the sorceress said softly, the little ghost finally shows herself. Lyra's blood turned to ice. Around the hall, people were groaning, trying to rise. Alderon was on one knee, trembling with the effort of staying conscious. Kael had drawn his sword but couldn't seem to stand upright. Morgana walked down from the high table, her movements fluid and unhurried. With every step, Her appearance shifted. The beautiful advisor facade cracked like old paint, revealing something underneath that made Lyra's stomach lurch. Still beautiful, but wrong now. Two sharp features. Eyes that held centuries instead of decades. A smile that belonged on something that hunted in the dark. 6 years, Morgana said, circling toward Lyra. 6 years I thought you died in the fire with your pathetic parents. 6 years of peace, thinking I'd finally wiped that sanctimonious bloodline from existence. She tilted her head, studying Lyra like an insect. But here you are, silent, obedient, scrubbing floors like a good little servant. How absolutely precious. Lyra backed toward the wall, her hand finding the knife in her boot. It was a tiny blade, useless against someone like Morgana, but holding it made her feel fractionally less helpless. Did you really think you could hide from me? Morgana laughed. Did you think I wouldn't eventually notice the mute girl who stared at my wolves with recognition? That I wouldn't feel the curse-breaking magic you've been weaving in the woods? She raised her hand and Lyra felt invisible fingers close around her throat. I've known for weeks, darling. I was just waiting to see what you'd do. The pressure increased. Lyra couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Let her go. Alderon's voice cut through the haze. He was on his feet now, swaying but upright, his eyes blazing with wolf gold fury. Your fight is with me, not her. My fight is with everyone who stands in my way, Morgana said without looking at him. But you're right, you're the more pressing problem. She flicked her free hand and Alderon flew backward into the wall with a sickening crack. The invisible grip on Lyra's throat released. She collapsed, gasping, her vision clearing just in time to see Morgana advancing on the king. No! Lyra's body moved before her brain caught up. She launched herself at Morgana, knife raised, aiming for anything vital. It was suicide and stupid, and she didn't care because Alderon was struggling to stand and there was blood on his temple, and Morgana caught her wrist without even turning around. Please. I've been killing Voss children since before you were born. She twisted, and Lyra's wrist snapped like a dry branch. The pain was blinding, white-hot, stealing thought and breath. Lyra hit the ground hard, cradling her broken wrist against her chest, biting down on a scream because screaming meant breaking 6 years of silence. And she couldn't. Pathetic, Morgana said. She kicked Lyra in the ribs for good measure, and something cracked. Your parents were pathetic too, begging at the end, please spare our children, please show mercy. As if mercy has ever meant anything in this world. Through the haze of pain, Lyra saw Kael moving. The captain had managed to get to his feet, was creeping along the wall toward Morgana with his sword raised. If he could just get close enough. Morgana spun and gestured. Kael's sword went red-hot in his hand. He dropped it with a curse, and Morgana was on him in 2 strides, her hand closing around his throat. The legendary Captain Kael, she purred. The Shadow Guard. I've heard so many stories. She lifted him off his feet one-handed, and his face started turning purple. Let's see if you bleed like everyone else. Stop! Alderon roared. He was transforming, the change ripping through him in broad daylight, bones cracking and reshaping. I'll do whatever you want, just stop. Morgana paused, considered. Then she smiled and dropped Kael, who collapsed in a heap. Whatever I want, she repeated. How generous. She turned to face Alderon, who was halfway between human and wolf, caught in the agonizing in-between state. I want you to watch. I want you to see everyone you care about die knowing you were too weak to stop it. And then I want you to live with that knowledge for the few days you have left before the poison finally kills you. She raised both hands, and the temperature in the hall plummeted. Frost crept across the floor. The torches guttered and dimmed, and from the walls, the shadows began to move. They peeled away from the stone like living things, dark shapes with too many limbs and teeth that gleamed like obsidian. Shadow demons, Lyra realized with horror. Morgana had bound demons to her will. Kill everyone, Morgana commanded, except the king. He gets to watch. The shadows lunged, chaos erupted. The council members who'd managed to stand tried to run for the doors, but the demons were faster. Screaming filled the hall. Blood sprayed across marble floors. Lyra saw Lord Aldrich go down under 3 shadows, his mouth open in a soundless scream. Kael was fighting with a broken sword and raw determination, keeping the demons away from a cluster of servants huddled in the corner. Alderaan, fully transformed now, was a whirlwind of fur and fangs, tearing through shadows that reformed as fast as he destroyed them. And Lyra, broken, bleeding, useless Lyra, could only watch as Morgana's massacre unfolded. No, not useless, never useless. She couldn't fight the demons, couldn't fight Morgana, but she could run, and she could think, and right now that had to be enough. The kennels, her brothers. If Morgana was here, revealing herself, burning through her power, this might be the only chance to free them. The chaos was the perfect cover. Lyra forced herself to her feet, her broken wrists screaming protest. She stumbled toward the hall's side entrance, the one servants used to bring in food and clear dishes. Most people had forgotten it existed. A shadow demon lunged at her. Lyra ducked, rolled, came up running. The demon followed, but its claws passed right through her, protected by the witch's blessing, unable to be touched by Morgana's magic. The demon shrieked in frustration and turned back to find easier prey. Lyra hit the servants' corridor at a dead run. Behind her, the sounds of slaughter echoed through stone halls. She pushed it away, focused on moving, on breathing through the pain, on reaching the kennels before Morgana realized where she'd gone. The castle was in chaos, servants running in every direction, guards shouting orders, bells ringing alarm. No one paid attention to one more person sprinting through the corridors. The kennels were on the far side of the compound, a 5-minute run that felt like 5 hours. Every step sent fire through Lyra's broken ribs. Her wrist had swollen to twice its normal size, the bone grinding with every movement. She burst through the kennel doors to find Torben cowering in the corner, eyes wide with terror. "What in the hells is happening?" he demanded. "The bells, the screaming—" Lyra ignored him. She ran to the cages, her good hand fumbling for the keys that hung on the wall. 6 cages, 6 locks, no time for finesse. The wolves were going insane, throwing themselves against the bars, howling with voices too human for comfort. They knew. Somehow, they knew what was happening. First cage, Garrett. The lock clicked open. Garrett exploded out, his massive body nearly knocking Lyra over. She pointed toward the door, then to herself, trying to communicate. "Follow me. Trust me." Garrett's intelligent eyes met hers. He nodded, an eerily human gesture in a wolf's body. Second cage, Finn. Third, Marcus. The twins, Thomas and Willem. And finally, Ash, the she-wolf who'd attached herself to the pack. 6 wolves, free and wild and furious. "What are you doing?" Torben had found his voice again. "Those are dangerous. You can't just—" Garrett's snarl cut him off. The kennel master pressed himself against the wall, whimpering. Lyra grabbed the rough cloth bag she'd hidden behind a feed barrel months ago. Inside were the 5 completed garments, wrapped in oilcloth. She'd stashed them here 3 days ago, some instinct telling her to have them close. Thank the forgotten gods for paranoia. She threw the bag over her shoulder, agony in her broken ribs, but she gritted her teeth through it and pointed at the door again. The wolves understood. They streamed out of the kennels into the courtyard, Lyra running in their midst. The forest. They needed to reach the forest, the oak tree where the 6th garment was hidden. If she could just get them there, if she could perform the ritual even though it wasn't complete, maybe it would be enough. "Leaving so soon?" Morgana's voice froze the blood in Lyra's veins. The sorceress stood in the courtyard, blocking the path to the gates. She wasn't even breathing hard, despite having just slaughtered half the court. Behind her, the castle was burning. Smoke billowed from the great hall's windows. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice 6 cursed wolves suddenly running free?" Morgana asked. Her dress was splattered with blood that wasn't hers. "Did you think I'd just let you scamper off to break the curse I worked so hard to create?" The wolves spread out, forming a defensive semicircle around Lyra. Garrett took point, his lips pulled back from fangs the size of daggers. Morgana laughed. "Oh, how sweet. The big brother protecting his baby sister. I remember when you were human, Garrett. Remember you standing so proud at your father's side, talking about honor and duty." Her smile sharpened. "You screamed so beautifully when the curse took hold." Garrett lunged. Morgana gestured and he slammed into an invisible wall, yelping as magical force threw him backward. The other wolves attacked simultaneously, coordinated, desperate, but Morgana was ready. She wielded power like a sculptor wielded clay, crushing and shaping and destroying. Finn hit the wall. Marcus. The twins went down together, whimpering. Only Ash managed to get close, her teeth closing on Morgana's arm. The sorceress screamed, actual pain, actual surprise, and backhanded the she-wolf with enough force to send her tumbling across the courtyard. "Bitch!" Morgana spat, clutching her bleeding arm. "That's coming out of your hide." She raised her hand, power gathering, death written in her eyes. And Lyra did the only thing she could think of. She opened her mouth and screamed. The sound that emerged wasn't human. 6 years of pent-up rage and grief and frustration and pain ripped out of her throat in a wail that shook the air itself. It wasn't words. Words were gone, burned away by years of silence, but it was sound, raw and primal and absolutely forbidden. The nettle garments in the bag ignited, not with fire, but with light. Blinding, searing, the accumulated magic of 6 years' sacrifice releasing all at once. The bag burned away and 5 shirts hovered in the air, glowing like captured starlight. Morgana's face went white. "No, no, you stupid girl, you just destroyed—" But Lyra was beyond hearing. The magic was pouring out of her now, uncontrolled, wild. She grabbed the first shirt, Garrett's, and threw it over the gray wolf's head. The change was instantaneous. Light exploded around Garrett's form. Lyra heard bones crack, heard a howl that became a man's scream, and then her oldest brother was standing there, human, naked, scarred, gasping for breath. "Lyra," he choked out. "What did you—" "No time." The words scraped out of her unused throat like broken glass. "Put it on properly." He yanked the nettle shirt over his head, and the transformation stabilized. Human, completely human for the first time in 6 years. Finn's shirt next. Then Marcus's. The twins. Each transformation a burst of light and pain and desperate hope. 4 brothers, back in their own skins. 4 men who'd been animals, staring at hands they'd forgotten they owned. Ash's shirt, the 5th one, the one Lyra had never quite understood until this moment, went over the she-wolf's head, and Lyra finally learned who the 6th member of the pack had been. A woman emerged from the light, young, beautiful, with Ash's gray-black hair and fierce eyes. She was crying, gasping, her hands pressed to her face like she couldn't believe it was real. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Oh, gods, thank you." "Touching," Morgana snarled. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds now. Ash's bite, claw marks from the other wolves, burns from the magical backlash. "Truly, but you're all still going to die." She raised both hands, and the sky went dark. "5 curses broken," she said, "and 5 lives I'm going to take in payment." The shadows came. Not the demons from the hall, but worse. Shadow wolves, twisted mirror versions of what the brothers had been. They materialized from the darkness, snarling and snapping, wearing the faces of nightmares. Garrett shoved Lyra behind him. "Run, all of you, run! We can't leave you. Run!" But Lyra wasn't running. Not this time. Not when they were so close. She still had the 6th garment. Willem's shirt, 3/4 finished, was hidden in the oak tree. If she could get it, if she could somehow complete it, even though the magic was broken, Morgana's eyes tracked her thoughts like reading a book. "The forest," she breathed. "You still have one more hidden, don't you? One more brother I missed." Her smile was vicious. "Willem, the baby, what is he now? 19? 20? Lyra's throat closed with fear. "I never could find him," Morgana continued. "After the curse took hold, 5 wolves I could track. But the 6th one vanished. I assumed he died, body lost in the woods somewhere. But he's still alive, isn't he? Still trapped." She was playing with them, drawing it out. Lyra could see it in her eyes. The sorceress wasn't tired, wasn't weakened. She was enjoying this. "Tell you what," Morgana said. "I'll make you a deal. You tell me where Willem is, and I'll make his death quick. Painless. Better than what I have planned for the rest of you." Garrett's hand closed on Lyra's shoulder. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't give her anything." But Lyra was already moving. She dropped to her knees and started scratching in the dirt with her good hand, ignoring the searing pain in her broken wrist. Not words this time. A map. The forest, the clearings, the oak tree. And a single word. Trap. Garrett looked down at it. Understanding flashed across his face. He met Lyra's eyes, and she saw her own desperate plan reflected there. Morgana thought she was getting information. What she was actually getting was bait. "The northern forest," Garrett said, his voice carrying. 3 miles out. There's an old oak tree, lightning split. The garment's hidden in the trunk." Morgana's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "We're not," Marcus said, stepping forward. "We can take you there, show you exactly where it is." "In exchange for what?" "Let Lyra go," Finn added. "She's broken her silence. The magic's already destroyed. She's no threat to you anymore." Morgana studied this for a long moment. Then she laughed. "Oh, you're good, really good. You almost had me." She gestured, and the shadow wolves closed in. "But I'm not an idiot. You're planning something, an ambush, probably. Get me into the forest where I'm isolated, then try to overwhelm me." "You're already overwhelming," Thomas muttered. "We just want our brother back." "Your brother's been dead for 6 years. You just haven't accepted it yet." Morgana's hand glowed with gathering power. "But I'll help you with that acceptance. All of you can die together." "Wait!" The voice came from behind Morgana. King Alderaan, still in wolf form but somehow standing upright, stumbled into the courtyard. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his fur matted with blood and ash. "You want leverage over me?" he panted. "Here I am. Let them go. Take me instead." Morgana turned, and her expression shifted into something uglier. "The cursed king, still trying to be heroic. How's that working out for you?" "Better than being a bitter witch who murders families for land rights." Morgana's face went cold. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Alderaan limped closer, and Lyra realized he was deliberately drawing Morgana's attention, giving them time. "I've done some research in the past day. The Voss family had something you wanted. Not just land. Everyone knows Ravencrest was rich territory. No. You wanted their bloodline, their ancient magic, the kind that only passes through family lines." He was guessing, but Lyra saw the hit land. Morgana's jaw tightened. "You can't take it by force," Alderaan continued. "Can't steal it or fake it. You have to be born with it. So you eliminated them, salted the earth, made sure no one would ever question it, and then you moved on to the next target." He bared his teeth. "Me." "The Thornline is older than the Voss," Morgana said softly. "Stronger, more useful. With your blood and my power combined, I could—" She stopped, catching herself. "Could what?" Alderaan pressed. "Remake the kingdom? Restart the old empire? What's the endgame here, Morgana? What's worth all this death?" "Everything," she said simply. "I want everything." She attacked. The blast of power hit Alderaan square in the chest and sent him flying backward. He hit the ground hard and didn't get up. "No!" Lyra's scream tore out of her ravaged throat. She tried to run to him, but Garrett held her back. "He's breathing," her brother said urgently. "Look, he's still breathing, but we need to move now." The shadow wolves were circling closer. Morgana was preparing another attack. They had seconds at most. Lyra made a decision. She grabbed Finn's arm and shoved him toward the forest. "Go! Get the 6th garment! Find Willem!" Her voice was barely recognizable, rough and broken. "Free him." "Not without you." "I'm the distraction," she said. "I can't be touched by her magic, remember? I'll keep her busy." "That's suicide," Marcus protested. "It's the only play we have." Lyra met each of her brother's eyes in turn. "I didn't survive 6 years to fail now. Go!" Garrett grabbed her face in both hands. "You come back to us," he said fiercely. "You hear me? You don't get to die after everything." Then he was shoving his siblings toward the tree line, and they were running, 4 humans and 1 woman who'd been a wolf, disappearing into the forest darkness, leaving Lyra alone in the courtyard with a furious sorceress and an unconscious king. Morgana watched them go, then turned her attention back to Lyra. "Brave," she said. "Stupid, but brave." She started walking forward. "You know I'm going to kill you slowly for this, right? Make you regret every moment of those 6 years." Lyra backed toward where Alderaan lay. Her broken wrist throbbed. Her ribs screamed with every breath. She was unarmed, untrained, and facing someone who'd been practicing dark magic for longer than Lyra had been alive. But she was done running. "Come on then," she rasped. "Let's see what you've got." Morgana's smile was terrible. "Oh, little ghost, You have no idea what you've just asked for." She raised her hands, and the world turned to fire and shadow and pain. Lyra dove behind a water trough as magical flames scorched the air where she'd been standing. The heat was intense enough to blister her skin even at a distance. She scrambled toward the stable entrance, using the buildings as cover. A shadow wolf lunged at her. Its teeth passed right through her shoulder, protected, but the impact still knocked her sprawling. She rolled, came up running, her vision swimming with pain. "You can't be hurt by my magic," Morgana called out, her voice echoing strangely in the courtyard. "But the physical world still applies, doesn't it? And I can make that world very uncomfortable." The ground beneath Lyra's feet suddenly became ice. She slipped, crashed into a wall, stars exploding across her vision. Before she could recover, the wall grew spikes, real iron spikes that tore through her sleeve and gouged her arm. Not magic, just reshaping physical matter. And that could hurt her plenty. Lyra yanked herself free, leaving fabric and skin behind. Blood ran down her arm to mix with the blood from her ribs, her wrist, the dozen other injuries she'd accumulated. She was going to die here. She knew that now. But if she could buy her brothers enough time, if they could save Willem, if the six of them together could figure out how to stop Morgana, then maybe her death would mean something. She stumbled toward Alderon's prone form. If she was going to make a last stand, it would be protecting the one person who'd believed in her. "How touching," Morgana said. She was closing in now, taking her time. The mute servant dying for her king. What a beautiful tragedy. Lyra collapsed next to Alderon, her back against his massive wolf flank. His breathing was shallow but steady. Still alive. Still fighting. She pressed her good hand to his fur and whispered, "Wake up. Please wake up." His eye cracked open, looked at her. Understanding passed between them in that moment. Two cursed souls, both fighting battles they couldn't win. Then Alderon's form began to shift. The change was agonizing and slow, bones cracking, fur receding. Morgana laughed, thinking she'd won, thinking the poison was finally killing him. But when the transformation finished, Alderon stood on 2 feet. Human, bloody and burned and barely upright, but human. And in his hand, pulled from somewhere in the transformation, was a sword. "You know what I learned about curses?" he said, his voice steady despite the pain. "They're contracts, binding magic with specific conditions. Break the conditions, break the curse." Morgana's smile faltered slightly. "Your curse said I'd transform 3 nights a week," Alderon continued. "That I'd lose control, lose myself to the beast. But you made a mistake. You keyed it to my weakness, to the poison you were feeding me. You thought that would keep me trapped." He raised the sword. "But Lyra helped me stop taking the poison 3 days ago, and Kael's healers have been flushing it from my system ever since." "Impossible," Morgana breathed. "I would have felt... You felt what you expected to feel. What I wanted you to feel." Alderon's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I've been studying your magic for months, learning its patterns. And tonight, you got arrogant, revealed yourself completely, dropped all your careful disguises." He was bluffing. Had to be. Lyra could see the tremor in his hands, the way he could barely stand. But Morgana hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. That hesitation was all Alderon needed. He lunged, faster than any injured man should have been able to move. The sword sang through the air, and Morgana barely threw up a shield in time. The blade bounced off magical barriers, but it forced her back a step. Then another. "Lyra," Alderon said without taking his eyes off Morgana. "Run. Find your brothers. Finish this." "I'm not leaving. That's an order." The command in his voice was absolute. "You've already given me more than I deserved. Now go. Let me do this one thing right." Lyra's throat closed. She wanted to argue, wanted to stay, wanted to watch his back the way he'd watched hers. But he was right. Her brothers needed the 6th garment. Willem needed to be freed. That was the only way any of them survived this. She forced herself to stand, forced herself to turn away, forced herself to run, even as behind her she heard the clash of steel and magic, heard Alderon's defiant roar and Morgana's shriek of rage. The forest swallowed her, and she ran deeper into the darkness, following the path her brothers had taken. Her body was failing, each step harder than the last. But she couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. Ahead, she heard voices. Her brothers' voices, arguing about directions. Lyra! Garrett saw her first. Thank the gods, we thought. He took in her condition and his face went pale. What happened? King's fighting her, Lyra gasped. Buying time. Need the garment. Need to finish it now. It's not complete. Willem's voice came from the shadows. The she-wolf, no, the woman who'd been a wolf, stepped forward. I'm Isadora, by the way. Willem's... We knew each other before the curse. No time for introductions, Finn said. He held up a bundle, the incomplete sixth garment, pulled from the oak tree's hollow. What do we do? The magic's broken. You screamed. Shouldn't that have destroyed this too? Lyra stared at the nettle shirt. It should have been ash like the bag had been, but it was still intact, the thread still holding, because it was never about the silence, she realized. It was about the sacrifice, the pain, the love that had driven her to weave and bleed and endure. The witch had lied, or rather, had told a truth that could be interpreted different ways. Speak, and the magic dies didn't mean her voice would destroy the curse breaking. It meant the magic would change, transform into something else, something stronger. We finish it together, she said, her voice growing steadier. All of us. Our blood, our will, family magic, the kind Morgana can't touch. Garrett understood immediately. He pulled out a knife and cut his palm. Tell us what to do. They worked quickly, desperately, each sibling adding their blood to the nettle fibers, Lyra guiding their hands through stitches that had to be perfect. Isadora helped too. She'd been part of the pack for 2 years, and pack was family. The forest around them grew darker, colder. Lyra could feel Morgana's awareness turning toward them, could feel the sorceress's fury building. They were out of time. It's not finished, Marcus said. There's still 3 inches of seam. It'll have to be enough. Lyra grabbed the garment. Willem, where are you? A wolf's howl answered, different from the others, younger, but filled with 6 years of lonely pain. Willem stepped out of the trees, and Lyra's heart broke. He was smaller than the others, his coat rough and scarred. He'd been alone all this time, surviving in the wild, unable to find his pack. Come here, baby brother, she whispered. Willem approached slowly, his eyes, so painfully human, locked on her face, on the faces of his siblings, on the family he'd lost. Lyra threw the incomplete garment over his head. The magic that exploded outward wasn't like the others. It was raw, unfinished, wild. The transformation started but stuttered, caught between forms. Willem screamed, a sound caught between wolf and human, agonized and wrong. It's not working, Thomas shouted. We need to complete the garment. We don't have thread. Use mine. Isadora grabbed the nettle shirt off her own back. Take it apart. Use the threads. Whatever it takes. Garrett was already moving, his knife sawing through seams. Finn and Marcus held Willem's transforming body steady, while Lyra and the twins worked frantically, stitching the borrowed threads into Willem's garment. Blood mixed with nettle fiber. Tears fell onto cloth. And slowly, painfully, the garment came together. The transformation stabilized. The light dimmed, and Willem collapsed into his brother's arms, human and sobbing and whole. Found you, Garrett whispered, clutching his youngest brother. Finally found you. The moment of relief lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Morgana exploded into the clearing, and Lyra saw what victory had cost. The sorceress was covered in blood. Her dress was in tatters. One arm hung at an odd angle. But she was smiling, and in her good hand she held something that made Lyra's heart stop. Alderon's sword, dripping red. The king is dead, Morgana announced. Bled out in the courtyard like a pig. Dramatic to the end. Her eyes found Lyra. Now it's just us. 6 cursed wolves who should have stayed dead, 1 broken girl and me. She raised her hand and the shadows came screaming. The shadows hit like a tidal wave of claws and teeth in screaming darkness. Lyra threw herself behind a tree trunk as the first one lunged, felt the impact shake the wood. Her brother scattered, Isadora grabbing Willem and hauling him away from the main assault. Stay together, Garrett roared, but together was impossible when the shadows came from every direction, pouring through the trees like smoke. Lyra's mind raced. They were exposed, vulnerable, 6 humans with no weapons against a sorceress who'd just killed a king. This was how it ended. This was... Wait. The king is dead, Morgana had said. But she was covered in blood, injured, exhausted beneath the vicious smile. And she'd needed to tell them Alderaan was dead, needed to announce it like a trophy. Lyra knew liars. Had spent 6 years studying every micro-expression, every tell, every subtle shift that indicated deception. You learned to read people when you couldn't speak to them. Morgana was lying. Not about the blood, that was real, dripping from the sword, but about Alderaan being dead. If he was truly gone, Morgana wouldn't be this frantic, wouldn't be throwing everything she had at them in this desperate final assault. She'd be savoring it, taking her time, which meant Alderaan was still alive. Hurt, maybe dying, but not dead. Not yet. And if he was alive, he was still a threat. Still the king, still the one piece Morgana needed to control the kingdom. Lyra's broken ribs screamed as she shoved herself upright. "She's lying!" The words tore out of her ravaged throat. "The king's alive!" Morgana's face twisted with rage. "Shut up!" A shadow wolf materialized inches from Lyra's face. She could smell the rot of dark magic on its breath, see the too human intelligence in its eyes. It couldn't touch her directly. The witch's protection still held, but it could corner her, trap her, while Morgana dealt with the others. Finn screamed. Lyra's head whipped around to see one of the shadows had gotten hold of his leg, dragging him toward Morgana. The sorceress raised Alderaan's sword, preparing to strike. Marcus slammed into her from the side. The impact sent both of them tumbling. The sword went flying, landing somewhere in the underbrush. Morgana shrieked with fury and blasted Marcus off her with raw force, but the damage was done. She'd lost her weapon. "Find the sword!" Garrett shouted. He and Thomas were fighting back to back, using broken branches as makeshift weapons. Completely ineffective against shadow demons, but they were trying. "Someone find the damned sword!" Lyra ran. Her body was a symphony of pain, broken wrist, shattered ribs, gouged arm, blistered skin, but pain was just noise. She crashed through ferns and brambles, searching desperately for the glint of steel. There. Caught in a tangle of roots, Alderaan's sword gleamed in the moonlight. Lyra grabbed it with her good hand. The blade was heavier than she expected, weighted for a man's strength. The hilt was still slick with blood. Alderaan's blood, Morgana's, she couldn't tell. Behind her, Morgana's laughter echoed through the trees. "You think a sword will help you? You don't even know how to hold it properly." She was right. Lyra had never trained with a blade, had never trained to fight at all. She was a weaver, a survivor, a ghost who'd spent 6 years making herself invisible. But she was also done hiding. She turned to face Morgana, the sword raised in a grip that was probably all wrong. "Maybe," she called back, her voice cracking on the words. "But you're bleeding, you're exhausted, and we're 6 against 1 now." 6 untrained nobles and a crippled girl, Morgana corrected. She was limping toward Lyra, her broken arm cradled against her chest. "I've slaughtered armies. What makes you think you stand a chance?" "Because we're not trying to beat you alone." Lyra's grip tightened on the sword. "We just need to survive long enough for help to arrive." Morgana's eyes narrowed. "What help? Your king is dying in a courtyard. Your court is massacred. Who exactly do you think?" A howl split the night, deep, primal, furious. Not a wolf's howl, a king's. Morgana spun, her face going pale. From the direction of the castle, the sound came again, closer now, moving fast through the forest. "No," she breathed. "I drove the blade through his heart. I felt it. You felt what you wanted to feel," Lyra said. The pieces were clicking together now. "You're not the only one who can manipulate perception, not the only one who knows about illusions." The underbrush exploded. Alderaan burst into the clearing in wolf form, and he was magnificent, larger than before, his coat silver white in the moonlight, his eyes blazing with golden fury. And behind him? Lyra's breath caught. Behind him came the castle guard, 20 armed soldiers led by Captain Kael, blood-soaked but very much alive. And more. Servants from the castle, stable hands, even some of the lesser nobles who'd survived Morgana's massacre. Dozens of people, armed with whatever they could grab, united in rage. "You made a mistake," Kael called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. "You left survivors, people who saw what you really are." Morgana backed up a step. Her shadows flickered, weakening. "This is impossible. I destroyed." "You destroyed the Great Hall," Alderon said. His voice came out distorted through the wolf's throat, but understandable. "Killed maybe 20 people. Brutal, yes, but not enough." He stalked forward, circling. "You overplayed your hand, revealed yourself before you'd consolidated power, and now everyone knows what you are?" "They'll forget," Morgana hissed. "I'll make them forget. I'll weave new lies, create new stories." "With what power?" Garrett stepped up beside Lara, his brothers flanking him. "You've burned through most of your reserves tonight. We can see it. You're running on fumes." It was true. Now that Lara was looking for it, she could see the telltale signs. Morgana's hands trembled slightly. Her breathing was labored. The shadows around her were thinner, less substantial. Dark magic required sacrifice, usually other people's blood and pain. But Morgana had been alone tonight, forced to draw on her own reserves, and she'd spent lavishly, trying to crush everyone at once. "I have enough left to kill all of you," Morgana said, but there was an edge of desperation in her voice now. Alderon's wolf laugh was chilling. "Then do it. Attack us. Waste what little power you have left. And when you're finally empty, when there's nothing left to shield you, we'll tear you apart." The standoff stretched. Morgana's eyes darted from face to face, calculating odds. The shadows writhed around her, agitated. "You could surrender," Lyra said quietly. "Tell us everything, who you're working with, what the endgame is. Maybe we show mercy." "Mercy?" Morgana's laugh was brittle. "From the girl whose family I murdered? From the king I tried to overthrow?" She shook her head. "I'm many things, but I'm not stupid. There's no mercy waiting for me." "Then there's no reason to hold back," Finn said. He'd found a proper sword somewhere, was holding it with the ease of someone who'd trained before the curse. "And 6 years as a wolf taught us patience. We can wait you out." "Or," Marcus added, "we can rush you now. See how many of us you can kill before you run dry." The brothers were spreading out, forming a loose circle around Morgana. Lyra saw the strategy. They'd fought together as wolves, learned pack tactics. Now they were adapting those tactics to human form. Morgana saw it too. "Clever boys," she murmured. "Your father would be proud." "Don't." Garrett's voice was cold enough to frost the air. "Don't you dare talk about our father." "Why not? I knew him well. Knew all of you before the curse." Morgana's smile was poison. "Did you know Garrett was going to marry the daughter of Duke Rothmore? Beautiful ceremony planned. Shame about the fire." Garrett's hands clenched into fists. Thomas grabbed his arm, held him back. "And Marcus," Morgana continued, enjoying the reactions. "So young, so eager to prove himself. Still a child, really. How did it feel, Marcus, being trapped in a beast's body through all those formative years? Did you forget what it meant to be human?" "I remembered hate just fine," Marcus said flatly. "And little Willem." Morgana's eyes found the youngest brother, still weak from his transformation. "Lost and alone, wandering the wilderness. Did you eat people, I wonder, to survive? Did you hunt children?" Willem flinched like she'd struck him. "Stop it," Lyra said. She stepped forward, the sword still in her hand. "This is between us. You and me. The last Voss and the witch who destroyed them." "Oh?" Morgana focused on her. "You want a duel? How dramatic." "I want you to stop hiding behind magic and face me." It was a calculated insult. Lyra could see Morgana's pride warring with her tactical sense. A direct confrontation would cost power, but backing down would show weakness. "You can barely stand," Morgana pointed out. "Your wrist is broken. Your ribs are shattered. You've never held a sword in your life. What exactly do you think you can accomplish?" "More than you think." Lyra raised the blade. Her grip was all wrong, her stance worse, but her eyes were steady. "You spent 6 years underestimating me. Let's see if that's a habit you can break." The clearing went silent. Even the shadows stopped moving, waiting. Morgana's smile returned. "Fine. You want to die on your feet instead of your knees? I can arrange that." She raised her good hand, power gathering. "But when I'm done with you, I'm going to make your brothers watch me turn you into something worse than a wolf, something that screams forever but can never die." "You're going to have to catch me first." Lyra ran, not away from Morgana, toward her. It was the last thing the sorceress expected. The gathered power released in a wild blast that scorched trees behind where Lyra had been standing. Lyra ducked, rolled, came up swinging. The sword connected with Morgana's magical shield and bounced off with a shower of sparks. The impact jarred Lyra's broken wrist, sent white-hot agony up her arm. She bit down on a scream and swung again. Morgana staggered back, more from surprise than damage. "You're insane!" "Maybe," Lyra pressed forward. Each swing was clumsy, wild, completely untrained, but they kept coming, relentless. 6 years of silence makes you a little crazy. Morgana threw up another shield, threw out grasping shadows. The shadows passed through Lyra harmlessly, and the shield held, but Lyra could see it weakening, flickering. "She's running out!" Kael shouted. "Press her!" The brothers moved as one. They didn't have weapons, didn't have training in their human forms, but they had 6 years of pack instincts and desperation. Garrett went high, Finn and Marcus low. Thomas and Willem circled wide, cutting off retreat. Morgana's shields shattered under the assault. She screamed, releasing a pulse of raw force that sent everyone flying. Lyra hit a tree trunk hard enough to crack ribs that were already broken. Stars exploded across her vision. But when the stars cleared, she saw Morgana on her knees. Actually on her knees, gasping for breath, her power finally depleted. "No," the sorceress whispered. "No, this isn't how it ends. I've worked too long, sacrificed too much." Alderon's wolf form padded forward. The guards closed in, weapons raised. There was nowhere left to run. "It's over," Alderon said. His voice was gentler now, almost sad. "You've lost." Morgana looked up at him, and for just a moment, Lyra saw something almost human in her eyes. Fear, regret, the understanding that everything she'd built was crumbling. Then the hardness returned. "Not yet." She pulled a small vial from her dress. Dark glass, no bigger than a thumb. Before anyone could react, she drank it. "No!" Kael lunged forward, but he was too late. Morgana's body convulsed. Black veins spread across her skin like cracks in porcelain. Her eyes went solid black. And when she screamed, it was with two voices, her own, and something much older, much darker. "Blood price," she choked out. "My life for power. One last gift." The shadows exploded outward in a final desperate wave. This time they were different, solid, real, strong enough to touch even Lyra. Claws raked across her shoulder, teeth closed on Garrett's arm. The guards fell back, overwhelmed. Morgana rose, her body twisted by whatever dark bargain she'd made. "If I die, I'm taking all of you with me." She raised her hands, and Lyra felt the pull, a vortex of dark magic trying to drag their life force directly from their bodies. The guards dropped their weapons, clutching their chests. Her brothers fell to their knees. This was it, the last desperate play. Morgana burning her own life to fuel one final massacre. Lyra's mind raced. There had to be a way to stop this, had to be some counter, some defense. The nettle garments. The thought came from nowhere and everywhere at once. 6 garments, woven with sacrifice and love, and 6 years of pain. They'd broken one curse. Maybe they could shield against another. "The shirts!" Lyra screamed. "Put the shirts back on!" Her brothers didn't question. They grabbed for the nettle garments they'd discarded, yanking them over their heads. The effect was immediate. The life-draining pull lessened, though it didn't stop completely. "Isadora!" Lyra threw Alderon's sword to the woman. "You too!" Isadora caught the blade and tossed her own garment to Lyra. "You need it more than me!" Lyra pulled the nettle shirt on one-handed, and the relief was instantaneous. The dark magic slid off the enchanted fabric like water off glass. But the guards, the servants, the others, they had no protection. They were dying, their life force being harvested to fuel Morgana's final stand. "We need to break her concentration," Garrett gasped. He was on his feet again, protected by the garment, but weakened. "Hit her hard enough to disrupt the spell." "With what?" Finn demanded. "We have no weapons, no magic." "We have family," Lyra said. An idea was forming, desperate and probably stupid. She said it herself. The Voss bloodline carries ancient magic, magic that only passes through family. "We don't know how to use it," Thomas protested. "We don't need to know. We just need to be together." Lyra grabbed Garrett's hand with her good one. "Blood to blood. All of us." Understanding dawned. Garrett grabbed Finn's hand. Finn grabbed Marcus's. The chain completed with Willem and then reached back to Lyra. 6 siblings, connected by blood and sacrifice and nettle fiber. The magic that flared wasn't dark like Morgana's. It was older, cleaner, the kind that lived in the earth and stones and ancient trees. The kind that predated sorcery and curses, that simply was. Lyra felt it rush through her, through all of them, a current of pure ancestral power. Not controlled, not directed, just present, whole. And it pushed back against Morgana's death spell, like dawn pushing back the night. "No!" Morgana shrieked. The vortex wavered. "You can't! You don't have the training!" "We don't need training," Lyra said. Her voice came out stronger now, resonating with something beyond herself. "This is our birthright, our blood, and you can't take it." The connection between the siblings blazed brighter. Lyra could feel her brothers' hearts beating in rhythm with her own, could feel the pain they'd endured, the love that had sustained them, the desperate hope that had kept them fighting. Family magic. The oldest kind. Morgana's spell shattered. The backlash hit the sorceress like a physical blow. She flew backward, crashed into a tree trunk, and slumped to the ground. The black veins on her skin started to fade. The darkness in her eyes cleared back to their normal color, and then she started to age. It happened fast, the price of the dark bargain coming due. Lines appeared on her face, deepened into wrinkles. Her hair went gray, then white. Her skin became papery, spotted. "No," she whispered. Her voice was old now, cracking. "This isn't fair. I should have had more time." Alderaan approached in wolf form. He shifted as he walked, bones cracking, until he stood on 2 feet, naked and bloody and exhausted, but human. "You traded your life for power," he said quietly. "This is what you bought." Morgana tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She looked up at the circle of faces surrounding her, the king she'd tried to kill, the family she'd destroyed, the guards she'd slaughtered. "I almost won," she said. It wasn't a boast, just an observation. "I was so close." "Close doesn't count," Garrett said. "No." Morgana's smile was bitter. "I suppose it doesn't." Her eyes found Lyra. "You should have stayed silent, should have kept your head down. You could have survived." "I survived anyway," Lyra said. "Just not the way you expected." "Clearly." Morgana coughed, and blood flecked her lips. The aging was accelerating now. "For what it's worth, you were stronger than I thought. All of you." "Save the apologies," Marcus said coldly. "You murdered our parents." "I did." No denial, no excuse. "And I'd do it again if it meant getting what I wanted, but it didn't, did it? So perhaps there's a lesson there." Her breathing was becoming labored. The guards stood in silence, watching a sorceress die by inches. "One thing," Morgana said. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "Before I go, the poison, the curse, they were never mine alone. I had partners, people who wanted the same things I wanted." Alderaan leaned closer. "Who?" "Find the iron circle, the ones who wear red stones." Morgana's eyes were clouding. "They'll come for you. They always come." Her voice trailed off. Her body went still. And then, like a candle guttering out, she simply ended. The corpse that remained looked ancient, dried, like something that had been dead for centuries. Silence filled the clearing. Then, slowly, the survivors began to stir, the guards checking on each other, the servants emerging from hiding, Kael limping over to Alderaan's side. "Sire," the captain said, "we need to get you back to the castle. You're bleeding badly." "I'll survive." Alderaan's eyes were on Lyra. "Unlike some people, I wasn't fighting with broken bones and sheer stubbornness." Lyra tried to smile, but her face wouldn't quite cooperate. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the pain was coming back in waves. "Stubbornness is a Voss family trait." "Noted." Alderaan took a step toward her, swayed, and nearly collapsed. Garrett caught him. "Someone get the king a blanket," the eldest Voss brother called out. "And a healer, several healers." "I'm fine," Alderaan protested weakly. You're bleeding from approximately 15 wounds, Kyle said. You're not fine, but you're alive, which frankly is more than I expected an hour ago. The return to the castle was a blur. Lyra remembered being carried. By whom, she wasn't sure. Remembered the shocked faces of survivors as they streamed back through the gates. Remembered the great hall, still smoking, bodies being covered with sheets. The cost had been high. Not as high as Morgana intended, but high enough. She woke in the castle infirmary, her broken wrists splinted and bound, her ribs wrapped tight enough to restrict breathing. Someone had cleaned the blood off her face and dressed her in a soft nightgown. Garrett sat in a chair beside her bed, looking half asleep himself. "Hey," Lyra croaked. Her throat still felt like she'd swallowed broken glass. Garrett's eyes snapped open. "You're awake. Thank the—" He stopped himself, smiled slightly. "You're awake. How long?" 2 days. The healer said you needed rest more than anything else." He leaned forward. "How do you feel?" Like I was trampled by horses and then set on fire, Lyra thought. But what she said was, "I've been better." "I imagine." Garrett's expression turned serious. "Lyra, we need to talk. About what happened. About the magic we used. The family magic." "Yes. The healers, the ones who aren't terrified of us, say it's rare. Ancient. The kind of power that gets passed down through bloodlines, but usually stays dormant unless—" He gestured helplessly. "Unless something like this happens." Lyra pushed herself upright, wincing at the pain. "Do the others know?" "Everyone knows. The whole castle saw it. Saw us standing together, glowing like torches, pushing back a dark sorceress's death curse." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We're either going to be celebrated as heroes or hunted as witches. Maybe both." "What does the king say?" "The king," a new voice said from the doorway, "says you're all heroes." Alderaan stepped into the room. He looked better than he had, clean, dressed, with fresh bandages visible under his shirt, but there were still dark circles under his eyes and a lingering weakness in his movements. Garrett stood immediately. "Your Majesty, I didn't hear you approach. I've gotten good at moving quietly lately, side effect of spending so much time as a wolf." Alderaan's smile was wry. "How's the patient?" "Stubborn," Garrett said. "Runs in the family." Alderaan moved to the other side of Lyra's bed. "I owe you an apology. If I'd been stronger, faster, smarter—" "You'd be dead," Lyra interrupted. "We all would. You held her off long enough for the rest of us to get into position. That's what mattered." Still, Alderaan sat down heavily in the chair Garrett vacated. "I'm the king. I'm supposed to protect my people, not have them sacrifice themselves protecting me." "With respect, Your Majesty," Lyra said, "that's a nice sentiment but terrible strategy. Leaders who refuse help die young and accomplish nothing." Alderaan blinked. Then he laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "You know, you're not nearly as meek as you pretended to be. I'm finding my voice." Lyra's smile was slight. "Literally." "So I noticed." Alderaan's expression turned thoughtful. "Which brings me to why I'm here. We need to discuss the future. Morgana's dead, but she mentioned partners. The Iron Circle. People with red stones. That means there are more conspirators out there." "I know," Lyra said quietly. "I've been thinking about that. And I think we need to find them before they find us. Figure out what they wanted, what Morgana was really building toward." "Agreed. But that's going to require resources, information networks, people we can trust." Alderaan leaned forward. "I'm rebuilding the Shadow Guard. Kael's leading it, and I want your family involved." Garrett returned to the doorway, clearly listening. "Involved how?" "However you want. Advisors, investigators, bodyguards. You're trained fighters, or you were before the curse. And you have access to magic most people can't even imagine." Alderaan's gaze moved between them. "I need people I can trust. People who've proven they'll stand against impossible odds. That's you." "We're not exactly popular," Garrett pointed out. "The Voss name is still associated with treason." "Then we change that. Publicly clear your family's name. Announce the truth about what Morgana did." Alderaan's jaw set. "She framed you, cursed you, tried to erase you from history. Time to write a new history." Lyra looked at her brother, saw the hope warring with skepticism on his face. "What about Willem?" she asked. "And the others? They're not soldiers. Finn wanted to be a scholar. Marcus was training to be a diplomat." "Then they can be scholars and diplomats," Alderaan said simply. "I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm asking you to help me save a kingdom from people who want to tear it apart." Garrett crossed his arms. "And what do we get in return? Beyond the satisfaction of preventing another massacre?" Alderaan's smile turned sharp. "Your lands back. Ravencrest and all the territories Morgana stole. Your titles restored and," he paused, "my protection, which admittedly hasn't been worth much lately, but I'm working on that." "He killed a dark sorceress while bleeding from 15 wounds," Lyra said. "I'd say his protection is worth something." "We killed a dark sorceress," Alderaan corrected. "Together. Which is kind of my point. Alone, we're vulnerable. Together, we're dangerous." The silence stretched. Lyra could see Garrett thinking it through, weighing risks and benefits. Finally, her brother nodded. "We'll need to discuss it with the others, but provisionally, yes. We'll help." "Good." Alderaan stood. "Rest. Heal. When you're ready, we'll start planning." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Lyra? Thank you for everything. I know what it cost you." After he left, Garrett sat back down. 6 years you stayed silent. 6 years you worked and sacrificed. And now I can talk," Lyra finished. "And honestly, I'm not sure I know how anymore. You seemed to manage fine when you were threatening Morgana. That was different. That was survival." Lyra flexed her good hand, watching the fingers move. "Normal conversation feels strange. You'll figure it out." Garrett's expression softened. "You figured out everything else." Over the next week, Lyra's strength slowly returned. The healers were cautiously optimistic about her wrist. It would heal, though it might never regain full flexibility. Her ribs would take longer, but ribs always did. Her brothers visited daily, bringing news from the outside world. The story had spread fast. The mute servant who'd saved the king, the cursed nobles who'd reclaimed their humanity, the evil sorceress who'd nearly destroyed the kingdom. Ballads were already being written, terrible ballads by all accounts. "They're calling you the silent survivor," Finn reported, flopping into the visitor's chair. "Which is better than some of the alternatives. Marcus heard someone call you that weird girl who talked to wolves." "Accurate, though," Lyra said. Her voice was getting stronger, though it still cracked sometimes. "Also, apparently there's a betting pool about whether you and the king are secretly in love." Finn grinned at her expression. "The odds are currently 3-1 in favor." "We barely know each other." "You saved each other's lives. That's pretty romantic in the ballads." "Real life isn't a ballad. Tell that to the minstrels. They're already composing an epic, something about love forged in curse fire and silence speaking louder than words." Finn made a gagging face. "It's awful. You'll love it." Despite herself, Lyra laughed. It hurt her ribs, but it felt good. A knock on the door interrupted them. Kale stepped in, looking official in his newly restored Shadow Guard uniform. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. "Never," Finn said, standing. "I should check on Willem anyway. He's still struggling with everything." After Finn left, Kyle approached the bed. "How are you healing?" "Slowly, but healing." Lyra studied him. "And you? I heard you were hurt pretty badly in the hall." "Cracked skull, broken ribs, internal bleeding. I've had worse." His smile was slight. "Though not by much. What can I do for you, Captain?" "Actually, I'm here on official business." Kyle pulled out a sealed letter. "From the king. He wanted me to deliver it personally." Lyra took the letter with her good hand, broke the seal, and read. It was an invitation, or maybe a summons. The wording was polite but firm. King Alderaan requested her presence at a private dinner tomorrow evening to discuss matters of mutual interest and future collaboration. "He wants to talk," Kyle said. "Really talk. Not as king and subject, but as two people who survived something terrible together. And he sent you instead of coming himself because half the court is already gossiping, and he didn't want to add fuel to that particular fire by visiting a lady's bedroom." Kale's expression was carefully neutral. Though, between you and me, I think he's also nervous. The king is nervous? About talking to me? You did see him at his absolute worst. Cursed, poisoned, nearly dead. That tends to create a certain vulnerability. Kael shrugged. Plus, you're the woman who broke 6 years of silence to save his life. That's the kind of thing that sticks with a person. Lyra folded the letter carefully. Tell him I'll be there. He'll be glad to hear it. Kael headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you'd be good for him. He's been alone up there for too long. Needs someone who's not afraid to tell him when he's being an idiot. I barely know him, Lyra protested. You know him better than most? You've seen what he's made of when everything's stripped away. Kael's smile was knowing. That's worth more than 1,000 formal dinners and careful courtships. After he left, Lyra sat with the letter in her lap, thinking. Tomorrow evening. A private dinner with the king. She had no idea what to wear. No idea what to say. 6 years of silence hadn't exactly prepared her for courtly conversation. But she'd figure it out. She always did. The dress Isadora brought was simple but elegant. Deep green wool that brought out the storm gray of Lyra's eyes, with sleeves long enough to hide the splint on her wrist. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed trying too hard. You look terrified, Isadora observed, lacing up the back. It's dinner, not an execution. I haven't had a real conversation in 6 years, Lyra said. Her voice still felt strange in her own ears. Too loud, too rough. What am I supposed to talk about? The weather? Politics? How we recently killed a sorceress together? Start with thank you for the invitation and see where it goes. Isadora stepped back to examine her work. You overthink everything. It's not a character flaw exactly, but it's exhausting to watch. Says the woman who spent 2 years as a wolf. Fair point. Isadora's smile was wry. She'd been opening up more over the past week, though she still flinched at sudden movements. For what it's worth, I think he's just as nervous as you are. The king doesn't get nervous. The man does. Isadora touched Lyra's shoulder gently. And you've seen the man. Not many people can say that. The private dining room was small by castle standards. Just a table for two, a fireplace, and windows overlooking the northern mountains. Alderaan was already there when Lyra arrived, standing by the window in simple dark clothes. No crown, no formal regalia. Just a man with too many bandages and a tired smile. You came, he said, like he doubted she would. You summoned. Lyra moved into the room, her movement still careful around her healing ribs. Kings generally get what they want. Not always, and this wasn't a summons, it was a request. He pulled out a chair for her. Please, sit. The food will be here soon, and I promise it's not poisoned. Too soon for poison jokes? Probably. But he was smiling as he took his own seat across from her. They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Lyra studied her hands. Alderaan studied the window. Neither quite knew how to start. This is ridiculous, Alderaan said finally. We've seen each other bleed. We've fought for our lives together. Why is sitting across a table so complicated? Because fighting is easier than talking, Lyra said. Fighting has clear rules. Talking is just chaos, says the woman who spent 6 years silent. Exactly. I'm out of practice. Lyra met his eyes. What did you want to discuss? You said matters of mutual interest. Alderaan leaned back in his chair. The Iron Circle. Morgana's partners. I've had my spies looking into it, and they found something. Several somethings, actually. Business, then. That was safer ground. Tell me. There's a merchant consortium operating out of the southern ports. They deal in rare goods, magical artifacts, forbidden texts, that kind of thing. And they all wear red stones, rubies specifically, set in iron. The Iron Circle, Lyra said slowly. Merchants? Rich merchants, powerful merchants. The kind who have enough money to buy noble titles and enough influence to manipulate trade routes. Alderaan's expression darkened. And according to my spies, they've been funding various projects across the northern kingdoms for years. Projects that always seem to end with old bloodlines destroyed and new powers rising. Lyra's stomach sank. They were backing Morgana. Among others. She wasn't the first, won't be the last. He paused as servants entered with food. roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables that actually had flavor. After the servants left, he continued, "They're trying to reshape the political landscape. Eliminate the old families, the ones with ancestral magic and historical claims to power. Replace them with people who owe loyalty to the consortium. Why? Control, magic, access to ancient knowledge that's locked in bloodlines." Alderaan poured wine for both of them. "Your family's magic, for instance, the kind that can push back against dark curses. That's valuable. Dangerous if you're trying to build a shadow empire." "So they'll come for us," Lyra said quietly. "Eventually." "Yes, which is why I need you and your brothers close, protected, and why I need you trained." He met her eyes. Morgana was one piece of a larger puzzle. If we're going to survive what's coming, we need to be ready. Lyra took a sip of wine, buying time to think. "You said you wanted to talk about mutual interests. This sounds more like you're recruiting us into a war." "I am, but it's a war you're already part of, whether you like it or not." Alderaan's voice was gentle but firm. "The moment you broke those curses, the moment you revealed your family's magic, you painted a target on your back. The consortium will see you as a threat or an asset. Either way, they'll move against you." "Comforting." "I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to keep you alive." He set down his cup. "And I'm asking, not ordering, asking, if you'll work with me to dismantle this thing before it destroys more families." Lyra studied him across the table, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of responsibility that never quite left his shoulders. He was asking for help. Actually asking, not demanding. "What would that look like?" she asked. "Practically speaking, your brothers rejoin society as Voss nobles. Take back Ravencrest, rebuild your family's reputation. Meanwhile, they help me investigate the consortium, quietly, carefully. Use their positions to gather information." Alderaan's gaze held hers. "And you? I was hoping you'd consider staying at court. As an advisor." "I'm not qualified to advise a king." "You survived 6 years in impossible circumstances through intelligence and determination. You broke an ancient curse. You helped defeat a powerful sorceress." His smile was slight. "You're more qualified than half my current advisors, and you have the advantage of not being corrupted by the consortium." "Yet," Lyra said dryly. "Yet." Alderaan picked up his fork. "Eat. You're still recovering, and the chicken's getting cold." They ate in silence for a while. The food was good, better than anything Lyra had eaten in years. She'd forgotten what properly seasoned meat tasted like. "Can I ask you something?" Alderaan said eventually. "Personal, not political." Lyra braced herself. "Go ahead." "What was it like? The silence? Did you forget how to think in words, or was it always there, trapped inside?" No one had asked her that, not even her brothers. They'd all been too focused on gratitude and relief to ask what the cost had actually been. "Both," Lyra said slowly. "The first year was the hardest. I'd have entire conversations in my head, arguments and jokes and observations, but gradually it got quieter. Thoughts became more like impressions, feelings, images." She set down her fork. "I started thinking the way I imagine animals think. Present moment, survival, connection without words." "That sounds lonely." It was, but it was also peaceful, in a way. No one expects much from someone who can't speak. I could just exist. She looked at him. "What about you? The wolf transformations. What was that like?" Alderaan was quiet for a moment. "Terrifying at first. The loss of control, the way my thoughts would splinter between human logic and wolf instinct. I'd wake up covered in blood, not knowing what I'd killed." He gripped his cup tighter. "But after a while, I started to understand it. The wolf wasn't separate from me. It was me, just simpler, more honest." "Did you ever hurt anyone?" "I don't think so. I tried to avoid people when the changes came, locked myself in the kennels sometimes, just to be safe." His laugh was bitter. "Ironic, right? The king locking himself in cages." "Not ironic. Responsible." Lyra met his eyes. "You could have let the beast run wild, used it as an excuse for violence. You didn't. Neither did your brothers." 6 years as wolves, and they never lost themselves completely. They had each other, pack bonds. Lyra's throat tightened. You were alone. Not entirely. I had Kael. He figured it out after a few months, helped me manage it. Alderaan smiled slightly. And toward the end, I had you, even if you didn't know I knew. You watched me in the kennels. Sometimes. When I could stay conscious through the change. He looked almost embarrassed. You were so gentle with them, my cursed pack, treating them like people instead of animals. It gave me hope that maybe I wasn't completely lost. The conversation drifted after that, moving from heavy topics to lighter ones. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled before everything went wrong, small memories that felt massive after years of silence and isolation. Lyra found herself relaxing. Alderaan was easy to talk to when he dropped the kingly formality. He had a sharp wit, a self-deprecating humor that caught her off guard. And he listened, really listened, in a way that made her feel heard for the first time in years. I should go, Lyra said eventually, though she didn't particularly want to. The healers will scold me for staying up too late. The healers scold everyone for everything. It's their job. But Alderaan stood, offering his hand to help her up. Thank you for coming. I know it wasn't easy. Neither was the invitation, I suspect. Lyra took his hand carefully, mindful of her splinted wrist. But I'm glad I did. They stood there for a moment, hands still clasped, and Lyra felt that electric current from the forest. The recognition of two people who'd seen each other at their absolute worst and somehow still chose connection. Lyra, Alderaan said quietly, I need to tell you something, before the rumors get completely out of control and you hear it from someone else. What? The curse is gone, completely. The healers confirmed it 2 days ago. He smiled, and there was wonder in it. I don't know how or why, but when we used the family magic together, when you broke the silence and the garments released their power, something shifted. The curse on me broke too. Lyra's breath caught. You're free? I'm free. For the first time in 8 months, I'm just me. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. And I wanted you to know that you did that. You and your brothers. You saved more than just your family. I didn't do it alone. No. But you started it. You made the choice to sacrifice, to endure, to fight. Alderaan's voice was rough with emotion. You could have given up 1,000 times, and you didn't. That kind of strength is rare. Lyra didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process being seen so completely by someone who'd started as a stranger. I should really go, she managed finally. Alderaan released her hand. Of course, sleep well. But as Lyra turned to leave, he caught her good wrist gently. One more thing. Tomorrow there's a court assembly. Public announcement about the consortium, about Morgana's conspiracy, about clearing your family's name. It's going to be a lot. Attention, questions, people wanting to talk to you. Wonderful, Lyra said without enthusiasm. You don't have to attend if you're not ready. I can make the announcement without you. No, Lyra straightened her spine. I'll be there. My family deserves to hear this publicly, deserves to be recognized. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Alderaan smiled. Try not to stay up all night worrying about it. I make no promises. The great hall had been cleaned and repaired, the scorch marks scrubbed away, the broken furniture replaced. But the memory of the massacre lingered in the way people avoided certain spots on the floor, the way conversations dropped to whispers near the high table. Lyra stood with her brothers near the front of the assembled court, wearing a proper dress for the first time in 6 years. Dark blue, well-fitted, with the Voss family crest embroidered on the sleeve. Isadora stood with them, still uncomfortable in noble clothing but determined. The room was packed. Every surviving noble, every merchant with influence, every guard and servant who could squeeze in. Word had spread that the king would make a major announcement, and everyone wanted to witness it. Alderaan entered in full regalia this time. Crown, formal robes, the weight of kingship settling over him like armor. He looked every inch the ruler as he took his place at the high table. Lords and ladies, he began, his voice carrying across the hall. Citizens of Ironhold, I've called this assembly to address recent events and set the record straight on matters that have been shrouded in lies for too long. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for information. 8 months ago, a woman named Morgana arrived at this court. Beautiful, charming, seemingly devoted to the kingdom's welfare. I welcomed her as an advisor, trusted her counsel, allowed her close to the seat of power. Alderon's expression hardened. That was a mistake. Morgana was a dark sorceress who cursed me, poisoned me, and planned to seize control of the kingdom through manipulation and murder. Murmurs rippled through the hall. People who'd praised Morgana a week ago now looked uncomfortable. She very nearly succeeded, Alderon continued, and she would have if not for the courage of people who had every reason to hide and instead chose to fight. He gestured toward the Voss siblings. 6 years ago, the Voss family was accused of treason. Their estate burned. The family was presumed dead, but that was a lie created by Morgana to cover her crimes. Alderon's voice rose. Lord Henrik Voss and Lady Celeste were not traitors. They were murdered. Their 5 sons were cursed into wolves, and their daughter, Lyra, endured 6 years of silence and servitude to save her brothers. The crowd erupted. Shocked gasps, angry shouts, people looking at the Voss siblings with new eyes. Garrett stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. My family is owed an apology. From this court, from the kingdom, from everyone who believed the lies and never questioned them. You have it, Alderon said immediately. On behalf of the crown, on behalf of this kingdom, I apologize for the injustice done to House Voss. Your family's lands, titles, and honors are hereby restored. All charges of treason are formally dropped and stricken from the record. He pulled out a scroll, already prepared. Furthermore, I'm granting House Voss a seat on the Royal Council, with Lord Garrett Voss serving as Chief Advisor for Magical Affairs. Garrett bowed, his expression carefully neutral, but Lyra could see the emotion in his eyes. And there's more, Alderon continued. Morgana was not working alone. Before she died, she revealed the existence of a merchant consortium operating across the northern kingdoms, a group that uses wealth and dark magic to eliminate noble bloodlines and consolidate power. They wear red stones set in iron, and they are actively working to undermine legitimate governments. That got everyone's attention. Lords and ladies were looking at each other, checking jewelry, calculating who might be involved. I am declaring this consortium an enemy of the crown, Alderon said. Anyone found to be working with them will be prosecuted for treason. Anyone with information about their operations is ordered to come forward. He paused. And I am establishing a new division within the Shadow Guard specifically to investigate and dismantle this organization. Kyle stepped forward, looking official. The Shadow Guard will be accepting volunteers. Those with skills in investigation, combat, or magical knowledge are encouraged to apply. The announcement continued with specifics: rewards for information, protocols for reporting suspicious activity, diplomatic outreach to neighboring kingdoms. Lyra listened with half an ear, still processing the fact that her family's name had just been cleared in front of the entire court. 6 years. 6 years of believing everyone thought her family were traitors. 6 years of hiding her identity and accepting scorn. And now, in one speech, it was over. After the assembly, people swarmed the Voss siblings, lords and ladies offering congratulations and apologies in equal measure, merchants angling for connections, lower nobles trying to curry favor. It was overwhelming. Lyra found herself pressed against a pillar, trying to breathe through the crowd, when a familiar hand caught her elbow. Come on, Alderon said quietly. Let's get you out of here. He steered her through a side door into a quieter corridor. Lyra sagged against the wall, her ribs protesting. Too much? He asked. Just different. I'm not used to people wanting to talk to me. Lyra managed a shaky smile. For 6 years I was invisible. Now suddenly everyone has opinions about my life. It'll settle down. Eventually. Alderon leaned against the wall beside her. Your brother handled it well. Very diplomatic. Garrett always was good at politics. Even before... She gestured vaguely. The curse. You can say it. Alderon's smile was gentle. It happened. We survived. No point dancing around it. The curse, Lyra repeated. The word felt heavy, final. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the assembly breaking up. "I have a question," Alderaan said, "and you can tell me if I'm overstepping, but what do you want now? Now that the silence is broken, the curse is lifted, your family's name is cleared. What does Lyra Voss actually want?" No one had asked her that either. Everyone just assumed she'd want her old life back. Noble lady, comfortable estate, careful marriage to someone appropriate. But 6 years of silence had changed her. She'd learned to survive on her own, learned to think and fight and endure. The idea of going back to embroidery and polite conversation felt like putting on clothes that no longer fit. "I don't know," she admitted. "I used to want to be a healer. Before everything happened, I was studying herbs and medicine, learning from the castle physician." She looked at her splinted wrist. "But that was a different person, a different life." "So what does this person want?" Lyra thought about it. Really thought about it. "Purpose," she said finally. "I want to matter. Not because of my family name or my bloodline, but because of what I can do, what I choose to do." She met his eyes. "I want to make sure what happened to my family doesn't happen to anyone else." Alderaan's smile was slow and genuine. "Then stay. Help me build something better. Not as a noble lady doing her duty, but as someone who's proven she can face impossible odds and win." "As what? Your advisor?" "As whatever you want to be. Advisor, investigator, liaison to the magical community. Someone I can trust to tell me the truth, even when it's inconvenient." He pushed off the wall. "I'm not asking you to serve me, Lyra. I'm asking you to stand beside me." The distinction mattered. Lyra could feel it in her bones. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking." Over the next week, life settled into a new rhythm. The Voss siblings took up residence in the restored family wing of the castle. Garrett threw himself into his new council position. Finn disappeared into the castle library for hours at a time, researching the consortium. Marcus and the twins started training with the Shadow Guard, relearning combat skills they'd lost during their years as wolves. Willem struggled the most. 6 years alone had left scars that ran deeper than the curse. He barely spoke, flinched at loud noises, preferred to sleep outside even with a warm bed available. Isadora stayed close to him. They'd known each other before, Lyra learned, had been planning to marry before Morgana's curse hit. 2 years as wolves had only strengthened that bond. Lyra spent her days between healer sessions and long conversations with Alderaan. They'd fallen into an easy partnership, reviewing intelligence reports together, planning strategies for approaching the consortium, debating the best way to protect vulnerable bloodlines. And slowly, almost without realizing it, the partnership became something more. It was small things at first. The way Alderaan's face would light up when she entered the room. The way Lyra found herself looking for excuses to seek him out. Hands brushing during document exchanges. Conversations that stretched long into the night. "We're the subject of extremely creative speculation," Kyle informed her one morning, clearly amused. "The servants have a running bet about when you'll officially court." "We're not courting," Lyra protested. "No? Could have fooled everyone who saw you having breakfast together this morning, or walking in the gardens yesterday, or spending 3 hours alone in his study the day before that." Kyle's grin was insufferable. "Just friends, I'm sure." Lyra threw a pillow at him, but she couldn't deny the truth, even to herself. She was falling for Alderaan, for the man who'd stood naked and bleeding in a forest and still found it in himself to fight, who carried the weight of a kingdom but never let it crush his humanity, who looked at her like she was someone worth knowing, not just a useful tool. The question was what to do about it. The answer came during a late-night strategy session that went off the rails when Alderaan accidentally knocked over an entire pot of ink. "Damn it," he muttered, trying to salvage the documents. "I swear, I'm normally more coordinated." "You're exhausted," Lyra said, grabbing cloths to help clean up. "We've been working for 8 hours straight. The consortium won't wait for me to be well rested." "The consortium isn't going anywhere in the next 12 hours. You need sleep." She took the ruined documents from his hands. "And so do I. We can pick this up tomorrow." Alderaan looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "Lyra." "Yes?" "If I asked you to stay, not for work, just to stay, would you?" Her heart kicked against her ribs. "Is that what you're asking?" "I don't know. Maybe." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm supposed to be good at this. Diplomacy, Negotiation, saying the right thing. But with you, I just... He trailed off, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Lyra set down the cloths and stepped closer. Just what? Just want to be honest. No games, no careful wording, just the truth. Alderaan met her eyes. I care about you. More than I should, probably. More than is politically convenient. And I have no idea if you feel the same way or if I'm reading this completely wrong. You're not reading it wrong, Lyra said quietly. No? No. She reached up with her good hand and touched his face. I care about you too. Have for a while now. I just didn't know what to do about it. Alderaan's smile was relieved and nervous and hopeful all at once. We could start with this. He leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, careful of her healing injuries, asking permission with every movement. Lyra answered by wrapping her good arm around his neck and kissing him back. 6 years of silence transforming into something fierce and alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alderaan pressed his forehead to hers. I should probably ask your brother's permission or something traditional like that, he said. Garrett will understand, eventually. Lyra smiled. After he stops threatening you. Looking forward to that conversation. They stood there in the ink-stained study, holding each other, and for the first time in 6 years, Lyra felt completely, perfectly at peace. 3 months later, the spring tournament brought nobles from across the northern kingdoms to Ironhold. It was tradition, games, feasts, political maneuvering disguised as entertainment. But this year was different. This year, the tournament opened with a ceremony recognizing House Voss. Garrett, Finn, Marcus, Thomas, and Willem stood in the arena, fully human, fully free, while the crowd cheered. Isadora stood with them, officially betrothed to Willem, her own family name restored. And beside the king, wearing a crown of silver and moonstone, stood Lyra Voss. Not queen, that would come later after a proper courtship and wedding, but promised, claimed, recognized. You look terrified, Alderaan murmured as they watched the ceremony. There are thousands of people staring at us, Lyra muttered back. Get used to it. This is your life now. I spent 6 years being invisible. This is the opposite of invisible. You survived worse. His hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. You'll survive this too. The ceremony concluded with Garrett giving a speech about resilience and family and the power of hope. It was good, practiced, meaningful, hitting all the right emotional notes. Then it was Lyra's turn. She hadn't wanted to speak, had tried to argue her way out of it, but Alderaan had been firm. The people needed to hear from her, the silent survivor, the woman who'd broken a curse and saved a kingdom. Lyra stood, her legs shaking, and looked out at the sea of faces. 6 years ago, she began, her voice carrying across the arena, I made a choice. Silence for salvation. My voice in exchange for my brother's freedom. It seemed like an easy trade at the time. The crowd was silent, listening. But silence isn't easy. It's lonely and frustrating, and sometimes it feels like drowning. Lyra's hands gripped the edge of the balcony. I lost myself in that silence, forgot who I was beyond the curse, beyond the sacrifice, became a ghost. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But here's what I learned. Silence doesn't mean powerless. Invisible doesn't mean gone. And sometimes the people everyone overlooks are the ones who change everything. She looked at her brothers, at Alderaan, at Kael and the Shadow Guard and the servants who'd survived Morgana's assault. We all have voices. Sometimes we just need the courage to use them, to speak truth even when it's dangerous, to stand up even when we're terrified, to choose hope over despair even when hope seems impossible. The crowd was leaning forward now, hanging on every word. My silence is broken. My family is free. But the fight isn't over. There are still people out there who want to control us, manipulate us, destroy anything that threatens their power. Lyra's voice strengthened. We can't let them. We have to stand together, noble and common, magical and mundane, broken and healed. That's how we survive. That's how we win. She stepped back, her speech finished. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the arena erupted in applause. Cheering, shouting, people on their feet. The sound was deafening. Lyra looked at Alderaan, who was grinning like he'd won a war. Not bad for someone who hasn't spoken in 6 years, he said. I'm never doing that again, Lyra replied. Liar. The feast that night was elaborate and exhausting. Lyra made polite conversation with 100 different nobles, accepted congratulations she didn't quite know how to process, and slowly realized this was her life now. Public. Examined. Important. She found Willem standing alone on a balcony, staring at the stars. You okay? She asked quietly. Define okay. Willem's smile was slight. I'm human. I'm safe. I'm engaged to someone I love. By most measures, I should be ecstatic. But I spent 6 years as a wolf, alone, wild, and some part of me misses it, the simplicity, the freedom from all this. He gestured at the party behind them. Lyra understood. You don't have to stay at court. You could go back to Ravencrest. Help rebuild the estate. I could. Willem looked at her. But you need me here. We all do. The consortium, the threats. This is bigger than one person's comfort. Your comfort matters too. So does keeping you alive. Willem's expression hardened. Morgana was one sorceress. The consortium is an empire. We stay together, we watch each other's backs. That's how pack works. He was right, and Lyra knew it. They were stronger together, always had been. Then we do this as a family, she said. All of us. No one left behind. No one left behind, Willem echoed. It was the promise they'd made to each other as children, before the curse, before everything fell apart. They returned to the feast together, and Lyra found Alderaan waiting for her. There you are, he said. I was beginning to think you'd run off. Considered it, decided against it. Lyra took his offered arm. What now? Now we dance. It's tradition. I don't know how to dance. I'll teach you. Alderaan led her onto the floor as music swelled. Step, step, turn. Just follow my lead. They danced, and Lyra stumbled more than once, and people definitely noticed. But Alderaan just laughed and held her closer, and somewhere in the middle of the song, Lyra realized she was happy. Not perfectly happy. Not without scars or fear or uncertainty about the future, but happy nonetheless. Later, when the feast wound down and guests began to depart, Alderaan walked Lyra back to the family wing. Thank you, he said at her door. For the speech, for being here, for everything. You keep thanking me like I had a choice. You always had a choice. You could have run after breaking the curse, could have taken your brothers and disappeared. No one would have blamed you. His hand found hers. But you stayed. You fought. You chose this impossible, dangerous, complicated life. Why? Lyra thought about it, about the real answer beyond the politics and duty and noble responsibility. Because I was tired of being a ghost, she said finally, tired of hiding and surviving and letting other people define who I was. I wanted to matter, to build something instead of just enduring. She smiled. And because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with a cursed king who turned into a wolf and still managed to be a decent man. Alderaan's expression softened. That's a pretty good reason. I thought so. He kissed her goodnight, longer than appropriate probably, but neither of them cared. Then he pulled back with visible reluctance. Sleep well, he said. You too. But Lyra didn't sleep immediately. Instead, she stood at her window, looking out over Ironhold. The castle that had been her prison was now her home. The kingdom that had scorned her family now celebrated them. Everything had changed, everything. And yet, somehow, she'd survived. They all had. Months passed. The consortium investigation deepened, revealing a network that stretched farther than anyone had imagined. There were battles. Some won, some lost. The Voss siblings proved their worth a dozen times over, their magic becoming a key weapon against dark sorcery. Lyra found her place, not as an advisor or a strategist, but as something in between, the person who connected disparate pieces, who saw patterns others missed, who remembered that every political decision affected real people. And through it all, her relationship with Alderaan deepened. They fought, they laughed, they supported each other through the impossible pressure of running a kingdom under siege. On the 1-year anniversary of the curse breaking, Alderaan proposed properly, down on one knee in the forest clearing where they'd first revealed their secrets to each other. I love you, he said simply. You make me better, braver, more honest, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Lyra pulled him to his feet. You already have, but I'll marry you anyway. The wedding was 6 months later, a massive affair that united two kingdoms and sent a message to the consortium. House Voss and House Thorn stood together. Attack one, face both. On her wedding day, Lyra stood in her chambers surrounded by family. Her brothers, looking uncomfortable in formal clothes but smiling. Isadora, now married to Willem, glowing with pregnancy. And the ghost of her parents present in the Voss family crest embroidered on her dress, in the old traditions woven through the ceremony. You ready? Garrett asked. Lyra looked at herself in the mirror. No longer the ghost who'd scrubbed floors and stayed silent. No longer the broken girl who'd endured 6 years of sacrifice. Someone new, someone forged in fire and silence and impossible choices. Yeah, she said, I'm ready. The ceremony was beautiful. The vows were traditional, but Lyra and Alderaan had added their own, promises about honesty and partnership and facing darkness together. When Alderaan kissed her as the crowd cheered, Lyra felt something click into place. Not an ending, but a beginning. The next chapter in a story that had started with silence and transformed into something louder, fiercer, unstoppable. Years later, when historians wrote about this period, they'd call it the Age of Restoration. The time when old bloodlines reclaimed their power, when dark conspiracies were dragged into light, when two cursed souls built an empire on the ashes of their pain. But Lyra never thought of it in such grand terms. For her, it was simpler. It was the time she found her voice, her family, her purpose. It was the time she stopped surviving and started living. And that, in the end, was more than enough.